everybody, it's S.J. Thomason. I am not sure if my friend Lisa is going to be able to make it today, but I can assure you that I'm actually monitoring this channel to make sure that if she does show up, we're going to be able to talk a little bit about how atheists can dupe people, and we're going to talk about some reasons to believe in Christianity. And so I received an email from somebody just the other day, a couple of emails actually, that this person was kind of concerned because a person called Secular Outpost had posted something about hallucinations as being some explanation for Jesus' resurrection. He thinks that you can have multiple hallucinations and people can share hallucinations. But I assured the emailer that unfortunately for the Secular Outpost, his ideas are completely flawed because you can't share hallucinations. Hallucinations are like dreams. I can't dream that I'm going to go on a vacation and drag my husband to come with me in my dream. Get up and say, hey, join me in this dream. You can't do that. Same thing with hallucinations. So this idea of using that to explain all of the evidence surrounding Jesus' crucifixion is completely flawed. So we don't want to do flaws. And so I want to say hi to people. If you're in the chat, I see P. Mars right now. And earlier I saw my good friend Susan. She's called Slam RN. She's a nurse. And I just want to say welcome. And I also am going to say I'm hoping tomorrow to get in on Hugh Ross's channel. I guess he's got something that he runs and he just posted it on Twitter. So I guess it's open to people like me, just random public strangers who are going to go on there and be educated by Hugh Ross and what he thinks about the universe. And so that gets us to this idea with the universe. And so the thing that you might want to posit is the old classic Kalam cosmological argument. And it says everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Scientists have affirmed that. And they've affirmed that it probably took place around 13 or 14 billion years ago. And therefore, the universe has a cause. Another argument that's pretty related to that is the contingency argument. And you note that everything in the universe that is composed of matter is contingent on something else. Therefore, the universe must also be contingent on something else. And so the question is, what is the universe contingent on? And of course, the contingent, what it had to be contingent on had to precede the time, space, and matter that began around 13 or 14 billion years ago. And so the big question is, what preceded time, space, and matter had to be eternal, immaterial, and without space, without any sort of limitations. And of course, that just spells God. And so we can thank God that he's given us plenty of evidence in the universe for his existence. And any philosophical argument can also look to that. And so, yeah, I want to say hi to people in the chat again. I see a Salvific Deputy. That's a new person, says, hi, SJ, how are you? I see Slam RN, Diagoras of Milos. We just had an interaction on Twitter with Diagoras of Milos. We also have Canceled One. What's the takeaway? St. Tommy, he says something really important. St. Tommy always comes in here with some words of importance. It says, atheists be reminded, our Lord Jesus Christ was crucified, buried, and rose from the dead on the third day for the forgiveness of sin. The gospel of grace, yay. So I completely agree with that. And so, yeah, the time, space, and matter, but we have to ask what preceded time, space, and matter with the start of the universe. Again, timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and we can probably say that gives us the same sort of qualities of God. Now, we also believe that God is omnipotent, all-powerful, and also intentional. And so that helps us get us a little bit closer to the Christian God. And of course, I'm a Christian, so I fully endorse that. And so that is that. And so I wanted to share with you, since my friend Lisa's not here quite yet, I'm going to share with you a new channel that I discovered not too long ago with a person called Lucas, and it's his Deflate channel. And I'd actually recommend people go over there. He has some very articulate, short little clips, little videos that are very interesting. And so I want to share that because it's actually quite fascinating what he's come up with. So let me just make sure I've got the audio on here so you guys can hear it. Okay, so he's going to talk about, and I think his explanation here is quite excellent. So he right here is going to talk about why is there no meaning in atheism. So this is Lewis. So Lucas, here we go. And he is apparently, I believe, where did he say he was from? I think he said Switzerland. So here we go.
How many times I've come across atheists who say that even though our universe is meaningless, one can still lead a meaningful life. Statements such as these sound nice for sure, But sounding nice is not quite the same thing as making sense. And since atheists usually take pride in their alleged commitment to rationality, a fishy statement such as, "there is no objective meaning to the universe, but you can still create your own meaning," certainly deserves some scrutinizing. That's exactly what this video is about, and what you'll learn by the end of it is that any atheist talk about creating your own meaning in an otherwise meaningless universe is nothing but the grandiose exercise in self-deception. This is Lucas from Deflate countering the skeptics' objections to Christianity. If you're new here, click that subscribe button to get our upcoming videos. So let's start with a simple observation. Generally speaking, on atheism, the natural world is all there is. Reality is ultimately made up of matter, and everything you see can be broken down into the particles of physics. This, of course, includes you as a human being. According to atheists, you're just a somewhat more complex arrangement of matter and thus only slightly different from a brick stone. Well, okay, unlike a brick stone, you're at least a living organism made up of cells with the ability to reproduce, but don't ever think that you're somehow special. No. Just like the mosquito annoyingly buzzing over your head at night or the mouse roaming your backyard, you're nothing but a collection of randomly mutated genes and biomolecules which natural selection graciously picked in the course of history.
And see, that's one of the things that we can speak to is this idea of human exceptionalism. And so you can talk about us being no better than apes and us being equivalent to apes, but of course we're exceptional in a number of different ways. We can make abstract conceptualizations. We have the ability to understand and comprehend very confusing and difficult mathematical concepts. For some people confusing and difficult, for others a little bit easier, but we still have this ability to look at math, whether it's in its basic form or something much more detailed, and we can do that well. Humans also can collaborate. Pretty interestingly, we can work together, and you don't see that with a lot of the animals. We can also apprehend beauty in a pretty great way. We can apprehend art. We can apprehend beauty in nature. That's why you see us admiring things like sunsets and beaches and mountains and other beautiful things that you see here in nature. And even places like Iceland or Alaska that feature these wonderful things in the skies, the aurora borealis, for example. So here we go.
That's because at the bottom layer of reality is just raw matter. Ever since our purposeless universe inexplicably popped into existence with neither cause nor goal. What's more, that universe is slowly but steadily running out of energy until it will die the so-called heat death.
And he's completely right about that, and scientists have affirmed that. And what's really interesting is, see, Hugh Ross has pointed out multiple passages in the Bible that talk about entropy in the universe in different ways. And so we realize that we're in this system of decay. And we also realize that our own human conditions are in a system of decay. And that's one of the beautiful things about heaven and the next world in which we will be occupying, if we so desire, that heaven is not decay. We will no longer see decay. You won't drive your car, ride your bike down the road and notice decaying leaves, decaying trees, decaying matter. You won't notice any of that stuff in heaven. It's going to be a truly wonderful existence. And if you want to know how it's detailed, what it's going to look like a New Jerusalem. Take a look at the book of Revelation.
Which will mean that at some time in the future, neither movement nor life will be possible anymore, as the universe will return to the randomness, nothingness, and meaninglessness from which it emerged in the first place. So far, so good. I'm fully with the atheist hypothesis. But now comes the not so subtle atheist sleight of hand. Because instead of actually being consistent and affirming that the meaninglessness of the universe necessarily implies the meaninglessness of his or her own existence, the atheist now simply turns around and claims that you can nevertheless create your own subjective meaning. You may rally, for example, for some cause of social justice, devote yourself to animal rights, donate to the Richard Dawkins Foundation, or simply enjoy yourself and eat ice cream while sunbathing at the beach. Whatever you pick, it will provide you with an island of meaning in the vast ocean of our universe's meaninglessness. As I said in the beginning, while this may sound beautiful, it's not only rationally inconsistent to the highest degree, but also a ridiculously form of self-deception. Because if the material universe is all there is, the notion that you can actually create meaning, which is of course an immaterial concept, makes as much sense as to think that you can throw a bucket into a dried up well to pull water from it. In addition,
he is just excellent as far as how he's saying this. So I just wanted to make note. I am watching the chat, and I do see that people, yeah, St. Tommy, he's got a little bit of a comedic value here, which is why I really appreciate him. And so I'm just gonna, yeah, he's a better comedian than most. We can definitely go ahead and say that. So I'm going to go back to that in just one second, but I wanted to address a couple of the comments that I'm seeing in the chat, such as this idea that Hugh Ross said. Hugh Ross has actually pointed to a number of different Bible verses, and just off the top of my head, I don't have the verses. However, I do recall that Hugh Ross, when he signed one of my books, when I went to somewhere on my school's campus, and Hugh Ross appeared there and he signed my book that he wrote Psalm 104. And so I'm just zooming over to Psalm 104 really quickly and seeing what we see here. He says, "Praise the Lord, my soul. Lord, my God, you are very great. You are clothed with splendor and majesty. The Lord wraps himself in light as with a garment. He stretches out the heavens like a tent and lays the beams of his upper chambers on their waters. He makes the clouds his chariot and rides on the wings of the wind. He makes winds his messengers, flames of fire his servants." Now you'll notice something really important here that he says. He stretches out the heavens like a tent. What's interesting about that is we realize that the heavens are ever stretching. That's one of the things that scientists have discovered, and one of the reasons they've been able to pinpoint the time when the universe began around 13 or 14 billion years ago. And so he said a few of those different kind of things. Now I'm just trying to see if this is an atrophy verse, and I'm not seeing atrophy in this particular verse. So I was recalling that, but it might not be that one. If anyone wants to find those verses that Hugh's referenced and bring those back to us, that would be great. And so let's go back to our friend Lucas here.
Even if you could magically create meaning in a materialistic and objectively meaningless universe, this subjectively created meaning of yours would be entirely pointless. For if ultimately nothing matters, then whatever you contrive to be your purpose won't matter either at the end of the day. Let me illustrate this. Imagine we lived in a world in which healthy food does not exist, but everything we take in would cause us to become sick. Now, in such a world, you are of course free to talk about creating for yourself a healthy diet. But that would not change the fact that whatever so-called diet you pick, it will make you sick, just like any other food you could take in. In the same way, to say that the universe is ultimately meaningless, but that you can still pick some cute little diet of meaning for yourself is nothing short of delusional. By the way, you don't have to take my word for it. Check out Friedrich Nietzsche or Jean-Paul Sartre, who are two of history's most important atheist philosophers. Nietzsche said that once you do away with God, the world will basically turn into something like an abandoned, dark, haunted marketplace where no one wants to be, as it's been completely drained of meaning. He truly lived what he preached, as he spent the last years of his life in a madhouse.
He's not exaggerating. That is exactly how Nietzsche spent the last years of his life. And of course, he was filling out the nihilistic views of atheism. And of course, you remember what Richard Dawkins, who's a famous zoologist, had to say about atheism. He said basically that there's no good, no evil, just pitiless indifference. And so he got the logical conclusion of atheism. Here we go.
Similarly, Sartre, in his play No Exit, depicted reality without God, ironically enough, as hell, and affirmed that life was absurd, but that we should just get on with it somehow, I guess. More recently, another atheist philosopher, Loyal Rue, confessed that even though all of reality is utterly meaningless, we cannot actually live this way, as this would lead to something of an existential collapse. And so he blatantly suggested that we should just deceive ourselves and propagate what he called the noble lie that meaning exists, even though it really doesn't. So, as I said in the beginning, when atheists talk about creating meaning, they are simply deluding themselves. it's probably only a minority who, like Dr. Rue, actually admit that meaning can only be affirmed by an act of straightforward self-deception. But this doesn't change the fact that self-delusion is exactly what's going on here. Having said all this, there is one last thing which needs to be mentioned here, which further adds insult to injury. Think about this. If objective meaning doesn't exist, how come the atheist comes to the meaningful conclusion that this is so? See, the sentence, "there is no objective meaning to the universe," is itself a statement that claims to carry objective meaning, and yet the proposition is that the universe is devoid of such meaning, which means that the atheist's denial of objective meaning is nothing but a self-contradiction and therefore complete nonsense. Christianity, on the other hand, can coherently affirm meaning as it postulates a divine mind who has infused the entire universe as well as human existence with meaning and value. This is why it's not only the more rational option than atheism, but also the one that is more practically relevant and actually livable. Now, does any of what I said prove that atheism is false and that God exists? No. Or does it suggest that all atheists are miserable? No. What it does show, however, is that atheists who hold onto their self-contradictory notion of meaning are rather like castaways who hope to be rescued by catching a deflated life belt. Here's the thing. We talk about meaning all the time. And if you're watching this video, you're likely to care about meaning yourself. Now, this intuition of ours that our lives are actually meaningful is fully expected and no surprise on the assumption that Christianity is true. However, if we assume atheism to be true, the very fact that we talk about meaning cannot be explained, but it can only be explained away. But hey, then again, rational explanations have never been a strength of atheists in the first place. So I guess there's really no surprise to that. Thanks for watching, and leave your comments in the comment section below, and hope.
So this is a really good guy. I hope you guys enjoyed him. He's got a lot of really interesting things to say. Oops, whoops. I've got extra. Hold on, I see I've got. Okay, I just was noticing I've got some interesting things going on. So I wanted to read the quote from you that's from Richard Dawkins, because somebody said I was misrepresenting him. And so I want to make sure I accurately read this quote. And so here is what the quote says. In a universe of electrons and selfish genes, blind physical forces and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt, other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason in it, nor any justice. The universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. I hope you don't think that I'm misrepresenting Richard Dawkins. I just quoted that thing in full. And so, of course, yes, they do believe, those who believe what Richard Dawkins says and who take their atheism very seriously, believe that this is a state of indifference and that people are merely composing their own meaning or deciding on its meaning when meaning itself is very meaningless. Blind, pitiless indifference. So just keep that in mind. So I wanted to point out also, just going back to that was actually Deflate's channel. I'm trying to get my comments up here. For some reason, I'm not seeing them in my thing. Okay, let me just see if I can. Sorry about that. Little problem here. I was trying to fix my thing so I could see my comments, and I'm unable to see my comment. Now I can see them again. So we're good now. So anyway, going back to this idea of atheism and a few other things about atheism that don't support it. Now, C.S. Lewis is a good example of a person who was an atheist for a while, and he really wanted to remain an atheist, but he realized that he couldn't remain an atheist because he said atheism is really just too simple. And he looked at this idea of justice and how we all seek justice. We seek fairness. People of sound minds, I should say, really value things like life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. People of sound minds tend to believe all of this stuff. Okay. We've had numerous academic studies that have cited the fact that people do have a desire for meaning. In fact, one study by Kinnear and colleagues identified the sources that people commonly feel, whether you're coming from an atheist perspective or a humanist perspective, or you're coming from the seven major world religions. We do seek meaning and purpose. So where do we get this intuition if there's no source? It doesn't make any sense that we seek meaning and purpose, but yet we do. In fact, I teach business, and in business courses, one of the things that we're finding more and more is that companies are able to motivate employees who seek meaning and purpose. It tends to be something that's really important. They motivate employees who seek meaning and purpose by giving them jobs that have some sort of meaning and purpose in them. In fact, if I go back to even the 1970s and some of the first studies of job satisfaction, the pointers to job satisfaction include the idea of a job that actually makes a difference, having a position that's important. Okay, so that is something that makes meaning. Okay, so any of those jobs that are out there where you don't feel like you're making a difference to other people in the world tend to be less satisfying. And that's something, again, that goes back a long time by some researchers from the 1970s, and it's been duplicated in many cases ever since. And so, yeah, I see a few people in the chat here. I want to say hi. Yes, Susan says, you mean entropy, like the end of entropy. Oh, good. So she's got some quotes here. Romans, in fact, I'm going to put this here. Let's just go take a look at this for our friends who don't think that there are some good quotes. So we're going to see, what does Romans 8:18 through 21? Let's take a look at that one first. Hold on. So let's see what Romans 8:18 to 21 reveals to us. I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. Now, of course, Romans was written by Paul many, many years ago, far prior to the time when they discovered the Big Bang, which is around 1925. And of course, that was by a Catholic priest, actually, Lemaître, came up with this idea of the Big Bang. And of course, a lot of scientists initially pushed back on that. Even people like Einstein pushed back on the Big Bang because he realized its theological implications. If there's a start for the universe, of course, there had to be someone who pushed that button, right? So there had to be some intention. So we'll take a look here. Just thank you again, Susan. I'm going to take a look now at Revelation 21:4-6. Now, it's believed that Revelation 4-6, it's believed that Revelation was written by the Apostle John, who self-identified in that book. And so here's what Revelation 21:4-6 says. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Then he said, write these down, for these words are trustworthy and true. He said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty, I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Yeah, beautiful stuff. And so we want to be consistent with a lot of our beliefs. That's something that's really important. Now, trying to see, we got Susan. That was a really good quote, Susan. Thank you so much for sharing that. Einstein was a pantheist, by the way. We've got a little comment on that. And so we've got some pretty good things. So there are some Bible verses, and actually there are more than that because there's some in the Old Testament too. Hugh Ross outlined a number of them. But we realize that even in the Bible, they understood that we're in the system of decay. So am I a friend with SFB Mod? I'm actually not sure who that is. Converse, hey. I'm going to open this up, you guys, in case any of you guys want to come in here. I was going to have Lisa in here, and I think something must have happened because I know she had an event to do this morning, but something must have happened that has delayed her maybe or just prevented her from coming in. And so I'm opening this up if you guys want to come in here. Now, I see people who've been here before, like Converse and Tommy. I believe Tommy's been on my channel before, too. And I saw John Maddox a little while ago. And, of course, Susan, she's a good person who always comes in here. And so... no, I don't know who SFB Mod is. I'm trying to think if I do know who that is. Should I know who that is? I'm not sure, unfortunately, who that is. So let me I'm putting this out here to see if anybody. So it's idiotic to lose respect for mentioners of Einstein. So we have something there too that's really interesting. Oh, we've got P Mars who wants to come in here. I forget P Mars's position, but P Mars has been here before. Hi, P Mars.
Hello, yeah, SFB mod. He's a guy on YouTube, and he's Christian. Okay. And then he goes around and tells everyone that Einstein was a Christian, and tries to use he thinks he can bring atheists to Christianity by saying through science and being like, look, all these brilliant scientists were Christians, so you should be a Christian, and science proves God and all this stuff. I think it's kind of ridiculous because Einstein was anti-religion and he was not a Christian.
I agree with you.
Yeah, he believed in Spinoza's God, he called it, which I think is sort of like pantheism. It's or deism.
Mm-hmm.
So
the people who believe in deism believe that God created the universe and then he sort of tucked out. He's like a bad father, just took off. And then people who are pantheists believe that God is part of everything immanent in the world. So
the universe is God. The universe is God. Yeah. So everything is God, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times people, the word pan implies this idea of everything. So everything is God. So, but it's also God is immanent in the universe, but not transcended to it. So the pantheist is faced with a little bit of a quandary when we come up with this idea that there is a start date for the universe. So that's
I get really offended by that line of when Christians do that, because it's they're putting science as the authority of truth over the Bible, right? And saying science proves the Bible, so then therefore the Bible's true. It should be the other way around, where the Bible is the main source of truth, and science sort of justifies the Bible, not science, not use science. Okay, I'm getting confused now.
Yeah, no, I think I see what you're saying. Now, are you a Christian, P. Mars?
Yeah, I'm a Christian, and I'm kind of anti-science because I think there's a conspiracy within science to threaten Christianity and religion. I know that evolution was put forth by Darwin, right? And Darwin was buddies with this guy Thomas Huxley. And Thomas Huxley coined the term agnostic, and he was I would say he was an atheist, right? And so it's and he helped Darwin become popular and push the theory of evolution. And so I think there's this secular or atheist conspiracy within science to sort of challenge the authority of God, the truth claims in the Bible. So what evolution, his son, Julian Huxley, I have a quote where he said that the real achievement of Darwin and evolution was to remove God as a potential creator from the sphere of rational discussion. So evolution, the whole thing was to challenge God as the creator in my mind. So I kind of leery of science. I understand, modern medicine has done nice things, and there's good things that come out of science, but there's also bad things people don't think about. Nuclear bombs and weapons and surveillance and spying on people. So it's it's a double-edged sword, kind of with anything. And people think they always focus on the benefits and the good things of science. And I never hear anyone talking about the negative aspects of it or the dangers of it, which are very real.
Yeah, those are great points. It's like science is a god, but yet look at what that particular god has caused, like you mentioned, nuclear weapons, atomic bombs, all kinds of pretty awful things. And then, of course, I probably shouldn't even say this on my channel because I'll probably get dinged for it. But even we're saying, where did this last pandemic come from? And so we believe some people believe scientists could have conjured it up. So it's
well, and then it's interesting they use it as a justification to close churches. So there you go. There's science being used as a justification to cut us off from God once again. And things think how different the world is for modern man than from 500 years ago, where the earth was kind of at the center of the universe and this is all there is. And now we're just told that we're just basically insignificant, right? Because the universe is so vast. We're just a part of a galaxy, but then there's billions of galaxies. So the earth kind of the more we learn and understand, it seems like it's made the earth more insignificant, where we used to be like human beings and the earth was the center of the universe type of a thing. Science is like making humans, I think, insignificant. You know, we evolved from a monkey, whereas before we were made in the image of God. You know, that's a big difference. So.
Yeah, I know. And I always get curious about people who like to equate themselves with apes, and they like to call themselves apes and things like that. And it's like, did you ever think about what apes are? You've got male apes, a lot of times male gorillas forcibly copulating the female gorillas, having babies, and then killing those offspring. I mean, and nobody's of course saying, oh, you did something morally wrong, because they don't have a moral code like we do. And they don't have a conscience like we do. And so actually, I think our conscience is another good evidence for Christianity. Just this idea that, and it's just, I should say, maybe not necessarily Christianity, but for theism, our conscience gives us good evidence, because if we do something wrong, it just starts gnawing at us a little bit. So that's what I think. I see a Converse Contender here too. So welcome in here, Converse.
Hey, what's up, SJ?
Not too much. Nice to see you. So what are you, a year now after your honeymoon?
Yeah, and I'm not, August I think will be a year.
That's fantastic.
We just had our baby, and we're losing a lot of sleep, but having a good time. And you know how that is.
I totally know how that is. Every 2 hours, you have to get up and feed the baby.
That's
and
right.
It's like,
yep.
And that's
She's
if you're lucky that
breastfeeding.
the baby went to sleep right after being fed, because my baby's a lot of times stayed up the whole time.
Exactly.
Oh,
They're like, I'm ready to get up, but yeah, I mean, I can't really be on here for long because I'm about to go in a store here in a minute. But yeah, I mean, I guess I could agree partially with what you guys are saying, right? But I mean, I might take up for science a little bit, because you know, like we might hear, I think I heard like that science, you know, look what science is doing. Science research is making people, keeping people out of church and things like that. But like, I think you guys agree that it's the people that are in charge that are trying to keep people out of church, right?
That's true.
Yeah,
That's
but they're
true.
using science as a justification. Like it's
Yeah.
when science and politics sort of cross is when it gets bad, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with that, right? It's the same thing with like, if somebody says like, well, look how many people are being killed by guns, like guns are a problem. It's like, well, we can agree that it's not guns that are the problem necessarily. It's the people that are using the guns, you know, and and as well,
like science is like a tool. It's not evil, but it's just, it is. It is being used for good, like,
right.
You know, modern medicine, and there's good things, but there are negatives. That's all I'm saying. Is like,
yeah, of course.
You know,
no, I can agree with that. But I would say that, like, SJ, you probably know that I take more of a John Walton view, right? That the Bible's not trying to indicate scientific facts necessarily. I mean, some things are going to be scientific just by the pure nature of them. But I forget what what it's called, but there's actually a term for revealing something in time to people where there is no perfect time, as far as the amount of knowledge people know. So, for example, if God were to reveal to the people that he did reveal to, they have a certain understanding of cosmology and science and things like that, where if he were to reveal things to us, let's say 10, 15 years ago, you know, we would have had a certain understanding. Maybe we would have said, you know, you know how many planets there are, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, 10 years later, we would have said, well, now Pluto's not a planet, you know. And this is something that Walton points out. It's like people 3,000 years in the future are going to look back on our science and be like, well, your science sucks. And so basically what he was getting at is that God reveals things to people where they are, and that there's never some perfect time where people are going to have all scientific knowledge. So basically, science is not going to contradict the Bible. If the Bible's true, it's the case. Science can't contradict it, because as Kurt McGregor and others have put it, like all truth is God's truth. We don't put different pieces of truth against each other, right?
Well, yeah, and the Bible says like human wisdom is foolishness in God's sight, right? And it's like you said, in 2,000 years, they're going to look at our science today and it's going to seem ridiculous. But I think the truths in the Bible are timeless, like about human nature and about God. So,
I agree with that.
And I think some people, it seems like they're trying to turn the Bible into a science book. Like, I don't think the Bible's meant to answer questions like how old the earth is, or is the earth flat or round? Like,
yeah,
the Bible's not a science book.
I agree. You know, I actually think if I had to do a prediction, I'd say 100 years from now, people are going to look back on our generation and realize what a bunch of lunatics people are in our governments for having things like Roe v. Wade and promoting this idea that of abortion. I mean, I think you'll say, you've got people justifying late-term abortions right now, which to me is just egregious.
When you think about when Jesus was born, they were killing babies back then too.
That's true.
King Herod was trying to kill Jesus, and he was killing all the babies. Yeah.
So one thing that I found really helpful about Walton's view, and I don't agree with Walton on everything, but one thing I found very helpful is some of the illustrations he uses, right? Like he says, a lot of Christians don't realize this, but he says, like I've always said, the concept, I've said this on your program before, SJ, that the concepts are what matters, not necessarily the language. And so he says, for example, think about love the Lord with your whole mind, and this whole usage of the word mind. He says your translators are really helping you out because the word for mind is entrails. It actually means like your guts. So it's how we say go with what your gut says or listen to your heart. They thought that the mind was in the guts or in the entrails. So, for example, with Egyptians,
there are neurons in your heart. So
yeah. So, but let's just say that we prove that the mind is in the brain through science somehow or something, right? It's not going to matter because just because they thought that the mind was in your guts or your entrails, the concept is to love the God with all of your mind. Whether they know exactly the place it's at or anything like that, that doesn't matter, right? The point that's why I say I agree with P. Mars that the point is timeless, that love God with your whole mind is the concept, not where it actually is, right? It's not trying to indicate to you that you have to believe that it's in your gut or something like that.
Well, it's like an allegory, right? Yeah, so it's about the meaning, not the literal word.
Yeah, they use analogical type language. Yeah. And I was listening at like, I don't know, when I was up at like 3 a.m. this past morning, I just looked on YouTube and Smokey Saint was live with some people doing a discussion, and there was a guy on there that as soon as I tuned in, he said, they asked him, oh, so you think that you have to believe in a worldwide flood in order to be a Christian? And he said, yes. And so I went into the stream and I said, what is the gospel? I was having faith in Christ, whatever. And you have to believe in a worldwide flood to be a Christian? He said, yeah. And I said, what does the Bible say about adding to the gospel? You see, because this is Walton's point. If you watch the stream I did with him, he says that he has a friend that is a biologist. And as soon as she goes to a new church and they say, hey, yeah, what do you do? And she says, I'm a biologist. She immediately dreads what's coming next, which is, do you believe in evolution? And he's like, we got to quit adding things to the gospel. You know, like if you believe in evolution, you're not the same as a regular Christian, or you know what I mean? Like, I just told him.
It's almost like evolution is the God. Do you believe in evolution? So I want to highlight your point there, Converse, because I think and both of you guys are making great points, but the idea of Galatians 1:8 is what you're talking about, where it says you're not supposed to add to the gospel. And then of course you have Revelation also saying not to add any more to what has been sealed and approved. And so the big deal with that is we've got places like the Mormon faith and the Muslim faith, both of those added on. And both of them added on with this idea that supposedly an angel contacted, Gabriel supposedly contacted Muhammad, and this angel called Moroni supposedly contacted Joseph Smith, and they added on to the Gospels.
Yeah, I feel like if God is going to judge me, he's not going to be like, how old is the earth? Is it round or flat? And then he's not going to judge me based on that. He's going to judge me. He's going to be like, did you love other people? Did you love me? You know, like that's what he's going to ask,
right.
I think.
And the other thing is that, like, I've never heard anybody really talk about this. So I was thinking about the other day looking in a commentary. I haven't yet, but there's a verse that I really was thinking hard about one time when I was reading, and I think it's overlooked because I believe it's Matthew chapter 25 where Jesus is saying I didn't come to abolish the law but to fulfill it. And I think the next verse or so gets overlooked because of how interesting and powerful that verse is. It says something like those who keep the commandments will be in the greater of heaven, and those who don't will be in the lesser of heaven. And I thought about that, and I'm like, this seems like how Rahab and, other people who didn't worship the one true God ended up having faith in God regardless and trusting in that God, and it was counted righteousness to them because of their faith. And, you may say, well, maybe they're in the lesser of heaven or something, there has, I've thought about it, and there could be multiple ways of interpreting that verse, but I've actually never heard anybody comment on that verse, and so I was thinking about it. What do you guys think about that? There being like a greater and a lesser of heaven.
Yeah, I haven't heard any commentary on that. I think that's fascinating. I'm gonna have to go back and you said that's in Matthew 25?
I believe so. Right after the part about I did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it.
Yeah, let me look that up because I just want to see what that is. That's somehow I don't even recall that.
I've never really heard about that either.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me because that's what I was thinking one day when I was just reading through. I was like, what? I don't remember hearing about this anywhere. Never heard anybody say it. But when I was reading it, I just thought, wow, that could have some implications for like people. Because the verse that says something like, some people will be saved even if though through the flames of hell or something like that, right? Or the fires or something like that. And, I thought about that and I'm like, well, they're barely saved kind of thing, but they were. So, and when I was reading Dr. Kurt McGregor's book on Luis de Molina, he has a different view of salvation. Like he believes pretty much what the church has always believed. But he takes a view that something like people can be saved if they respond to God in the best to their ability. Basically, the knowledge that they have been given. So, somebody on a foreign island, unlike the missionary point of view, where it's like, oh yeah, they're on a foreign island, they don't know about Christ. We need to go there and tell them so they can be saved. His view was more like, listen, if they're like Rahab and they respond to God in the best way possible and put faith in the God to the best of their knowledge, then they can be saved. And to some people that could possibly sound a little heretical, but I don't know, because it almost seems biblical with people like Rahab and others.
I think about
I want to read the verse too. I found it. Yeah, let me read this. So it says, this is actually Matthew 5:17. It starts. So do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until the heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So I think it has to do with they're all in the kingdom. So it's not a lesser heaven. It's just called least in heaven.
Yeah. And I think about this, like whenever the guy was saying, oh yeah, if you don't believe in a worldwide flood, you're not saved or you're not a Christian. And I'm like, how can you possibly know that? Like, was Rahab saved? Did she, like, what if she took an aberrant view? Or like, what if Abraham, I said, do you think that Abraham shared your view on Genesis, even though he didn't have the book of Genesis and he was, not from he was from the Chaldean. So he probably took a lot of aberrant views. His dad was said to have been an idolater in many traditions, so he probably grew up worshiping multiple gods before he put his faith in God. And so, I mean, I'm just, it's just a hard thing to say that like everything is completely, changed now. But
I think one thing that relates to is this idea that right now you've got people saying there is a conflict going on between Protestants and Catholics, and one of the Catholics tend to believe that Mary was an eternal virgin, that she was Jesus was immaculately conceived, and that the brothers that are referenced in the Bible are actually her. They're actually relatives, they're actually cousins. And then so that's a Catholic belief, and that's gone back to some ancients in the Catholic faith. But there's also people even in the ancient world who endorsed what the Protestants believe, that Jesus had physical brothers who were born after Jesus was born. And so I went through and I read all of these verses, and I support the idea that Jesus, after reading all the verses and reflecting on it and looking even what the ancients said, I think we've got good evidence to show that Jesus had these brothers, that half brothers that were that Mary conceived after him. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because that belief itself, you're not going to get into heaven and God's going to say, what did you think about Mary? Was she an eternal virgin? Or he was like that. That's not, I mean, the issue is Jesus, just kind of the same thing, or else you'd be putting a whole bunch of Catholics into hell for that belief.
I think we all believe things that aren't true. Like, I mean, we try to find the truth, but it's kind of like hard because we live in this like corrupt world, and there's deception and lies, propaganda and stuff. So I don't think anyone dies with like all their beliefs are true. So if it's based on your beliefs, then like we're all, going to hell, I guess. So I think it's about it's about our hearts. Like, I don't think God really cares about our beliefs.
I'm going to listen offline. Okay.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Good having you here, Converse. I know Converse got to go into a store.
Everyone wants to talk about salvation all the time. I'm always like, I focus on life and love and stuff in this life, and I don't really think about the afterlife too much, actually. So, but a lot of Christians focus on it.
I think a lot of Christians focus on it, but I even found that a lot of atheists really focus on it, because one thing I've never given really any thought to before encountering a bunch of atheists on Twitter was hell. Like, I never thought about hell. I figure I'm not going there, so I don't have to give it any thought. And atheists are always like, okay, are we going to be eternally tormented, or are we going to be annihilated? And I'm like, I don't know. I haven't given that any thought to what's going to happen to you if you want. But I do know that like, I just saw Randall Rouser's he was just on my channel not too long ago, and he's always posting stuff about like, he doesn't believe there's eternal torment, and so so he thinks it's not a good Christian to believe in eternal torment. And I'm kind of like, well, I don't know. The Bible's kind of a little bit vague on some of that, so I don't know.
Yeah, it seems contradictory to like a God who is of love and mercy and grace to eternally torment someone. So, I mean, in my opinion, I don't believe in eternal torment either, but it's like, if other people want to believe in that, I don't care, you can believe what you want. I don't think it's that important, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I did.
Well, I think that the idea is the person would have torment. I mean, my conception of hell is that it's absence of God. Like, God is not, it's an existence where you've rejected God and God's allowed you to do that. And so I think the torment would be being without God. And so.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as like, God is love. Okay. And I know before I was a Christian, even though I wasn't like the most angry, hateful person, I still had those feelings. Right. And then like, since becoming a Christian, I try to let go of anger and hate, and it's like made my life 100% better. So it's like, I feel like in this life, if you don't have Christ, your life is hell, and Christ kind of takes away your anxieties, your tensions. He gives you peace and joy, and I think he's the answer to a lot of things like mental illness and depression and stuff like that.
I couldn't agree with you more. I totally agree. Can you tell us how did you come to Jesus? How did you decide because you said at one point you weren't. So how did that all happen?
Well, I was raised Catholic, right? And if Christianity was, I mean, like, if you're a Catholic, whatever, God bless you, I love you. But like for me personally, if that's what Christianity was about, I wouldn't want to be a Christian. And then I just found other different Christian ideas that I liked. So I kind of just decided to learn. I wanted to not be angry anymore. And I wanted to learn about love. So I read the Gospels because Jesus is like a good example of love, right? So, and then when I read what Jesus said, like, especially the thing that really touched my heart was about loving your enemies and how it's easy to love people that are nice to you. Like anyone can love someone that treats them well, but the true test is to like love the people that get on your nerves. And
yeah,
that really spoke to my heart. And so I was like, I believe what Jesus says is true. So I became a Christian, I guess.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's great. And so I just want to go back to you saying you're raised Catholic. It's so funny because I was raised Catholic too, and I got mad at the Catholic Church, and so I left. I was kind of similar in a way, and so did Sal.
Yeah.
I had Sal on my channel, and he left the Catholic Church too, and so I gravitated back. I'm not at the Catholic Church anymore, but I go to church, so I'm a Baptist now. So what do you do? Are you an evangelical, or what do you consider yourself?
I guess non-denominational. I've just been kind of studying, and I've only been doing this for about a year now. So
okay,
I've been studying. I'm just more. I like the grace and love, and I don't know. I don't think you necessarily have to go to church. I would like to, but I don't know. I got kind. Maybe I will eventually someday. So.
Do you have kids?
No, I don't.
Yeah, maybe sometimes people when they have kids, that's kind of a time just to let them know about there's hope out there.
Maybe I could meet a wife at a church. I should go to church to meet a wife or something. But I did want to make one point about atheism. I guess it was kind of on topic before we end this. Is that
yeah?
So one criticism atheists will level at Christians is how there's been all these in the past. We've made predictions like the world's going to end, and then it didn't end. And they'll use that as an argument to be like, see, it's not true. But when atheists do this to us, I think we should hold them to the same standard in science. Like think about Al Gore's global warming documentary that came out, Inconvenient Truth, in like the late 90s or something. It made a bunch of like what you would call end of the world predictions based on science that never came true, right? So hold them to the same standard and be like, if you're not going to believe in Christianity because some Christians made predictions that were bogus, then you shouldn't believe in science because science makes predictions that are bogus. I don't know. I thought that was a good argument maybe people could use. So I thought I'd just share that.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, I think one of the things with evolution is you hear people arguing about that back and forth, even Christians. I'm going to have a Christian on my channel. Oh shoot, now I'm forgetting his name all of a sudden. Joshua Swamidas, and he takes this view that he doesn't believe in intelligent design, and I've heard him arguing with other Christians about intelligent design. And then I heard him just talking to a paleontologist who told him that one of the issues with evolution that people don't talk about so much is we don't have these transitory fossils in a lot of cases. So there's some difficulties.
Yeah, the fossil record actually kind of goes against evolution because you would expect these transitional fossils to appear because it would take a long time for these organisms to change, but we don't really see that. We see kind of like organisms disappear and then these other organisms just kind of appear to replace the niche in the environment or whatever.
Yeah, that just reminded me of another thing I just saw this morning. And so somebody said, I just saw this apparently there was a gigantic skull unearthed in China that apparently had been discovered decades ago, but they hid it because these Japanese people were attacking them at the time. So they hid the skull, but the skull's been unearthed again. And it's apparently way bigger than our heads, like a traditional human head. And so the idea is in the Bible, there are these Nephilim that are giants. I mean, is it possible that skull could be part of the Nephilim? So I don't know if you heard of that. They're thinking it's a different species.
I've looked into, it would have to be a different species. I've kind of looked into this conspiracy that there were giants in the past. And from what I understand, like, this is based on science, of course, so take it, but they say like the human body, if you get above like 8 feet, 9 feet, it's hard for the heart to pump blood. So like that, like if you notice, like
Mhm.
people who are really tall, they have a lot of health problems and they won't live very long. So it would have to be some sort of different species, I would say, than human. Maybe I don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff in there. Like I think there's some weird stuff in the Book of Enoch where it talks about the fallen angels taught women how to wear jewelry and makeup to become more attractive. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So. Yeah, there's some interesting stuff in there. And Ken Ami, he's been on my channel before, and I'm seeing some fun people in the chat, by the way. Otangelo, St. Tommy, J. Mike. I saw Nathan a little while ago, so good stuff. I think Nathan might have heard the thunder. Did you hear the thunder that's at my house?
I heard it a little bit, I think, yeah.
Okay, because it was really loud, and I thought, I didn't know if my speaker, if
it's like, so. I didn't think it was thunder, though, because it looks like the weather's really nice there behind you.
Yeah. That's my green screen. The weather's it's really I just saw the neighborhood.
Looks like a beautiful day there.
Yeah, yeah. This is actually, if you can see this, you can see there. That's the bike path that I ride on, which is pretty exciting.
Nice.
It's got some good stuff. Yeah, so that's one thing with atheism. Another thing with atheism I just want to bring up is when an atheist talks about the problem of pain or the problem of evil or the problem of suffering, a lot of times, as you realize, in the atheistic naturalistic universe, how can you say that it's even a problem? I mean, I guess it's a problem because it's a problem, but it doesn't have. Yeah, I'm streaming in the middle of a forest. No, but I mean, I say that it's a problem, but they say, well, therefore there can't be a benevolent, loving God. But I think the idea of is a conception of God, and going back to what C.S. Lewis talks about, God doesn't necessarily want us to have these plush, easy, pleasurable lives. God puts us through, a lot of us go through hell in some way to get to heaven, and Jesus went through hell to get to heaven. And so it's not like our leader didn't do the same thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think like people, a lot of times they'll pray for an easy life, but we should pray for the strength to overcome a difficult one. It's not the atheists just that they have this like fantasy where love is just about being kind and gentle all the time, but there's like a sternness to love too, where it wants to, like a father wants to teach his son, so he might kind of kick him out of the house so he can learn some valuable lessons type of thing. And some people might think that's mean, but that's actually loving, because if like the father just keeps the son at home the whole time, he'll become dependent on the father and he won't learn, to be on his own and stand up on his own 2 feet. And that's a bad thing, right? Like it's good to learn independence and stuff. And so sometimes it's like the loving thing to do is to kind of cut people off a little bit and experience pain. I think I came to God when I went through like a tough time in my life, the breakup with a girl. And it's like I had these feelings where it's like I wanted to be angry at her, right? But then I didn't. I knew it's bad to be angry at someone just because like they don't want to be with you anymore or whatever. So it's like I was like praying to God and asking him to help me be loving and stuff. And that, like, so going through a really tough time like that helped me come closer to God. So I don't know. It's yeah. And I think we've also been like atheists, I think, have a different concept of love than what love. We've been brainwashed into this different idea of love. Like the Greek had all these different words for love, I think 6. And we use the same word love if I'm talking to my mother, to my girlfriend, to I love pizza. We use that word for everything. And there's different types of love. And I think people confuse like a fear of losing something with love. Because I think I believe in that like maxim, if you really love something, you let it free. If it comes back to you, then the love is true. And that's what God has done for us, is he's given us the freedom, because you can't force love. Real love is about freedom. So he gives us freedom, and he wants us to come back to him on our own free will. But the problem is we use our free will to do evil, and that's where you get the problem of evil. So it's not God's fault. It's just that's the way it has to be for love to exist. It has to create like a free will environment. And then so atheists just see the evil and they don't see the good in it.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree with you. And I even think a lot of atheists kind of categorize Jesus as being like a Barney kind of character where he's just this happy-go-lucky, loving, all this stuff. And Jesus was, but Jesus was also tough, and he
Like
called out the
hippie Jesus, I
Pharisees.
call it. Yeah, I call it hippie Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sure, you can read his verses, but then go read his parables. Those are tough. Those parables a lot of
Yeah.
people don't like. So
yeah, he wasn't always nice. He was very insulting, actually, and yeah, he was radical. He had radical ideas. He rebelled against the norms and the authorities of the time.
yeah.
His own family thought he was crazy. There's a verse in Mark, I think, where his family comes out to the desert and they're like, Jesus, you're out of your mind. Come back to society. This is nuts. And Jesus kind of just ignores his own family. And he kind of says, my this is my family, these people that have love in their hearts and stuff. So I don't know. I love that story. It's awesome.
I do too, because that gives us more evidence that, I mean, that's just the fact is then you say to yourself, okay, you've got his family who tried to stop him. You've got Peter who denied him 3 times. You've got Saul who was busy, killing Christians and standing at the feet of St. Stephen when St. Stephen was being stoned and approving of that. And then suddenly those 3 people come to Jesus, start praying, worshiping him for decades, despite massive persecution over the decades, being stoned, imprisoned, all that kind of stuff. So they weren't given any sort of easy life. They were given hell. I mean, that's hell. That's the kind of hell that God has us all going through. So they were given hell. I mean, we don't have to go through it quite like that, but they still believed.
But to them, I think they experienced joy because God, it's like you can go through these terrible circumstances from a worldly perspective, but from their perspective, they're in the kingdom of God. They're having a good time, I think, when they're doing this stuff.
They were in prison singing. Who sings in prison? They're so happy that they were worthy enough to be thrown in prison, and because of Jesus.
And that's how I think they really inspired a lot of people to become Christians. They would look at them and be like, "How are you happy? What are you doing? What are you doing that I'm not doing?" I think they were happier in poor circumstances than a lot of the worldly people. The rich people aren't necessarily happy. There's the classic stereotype of the spoiled rich kid who's you give him an amazing car for his birthday and it's the wrong color and he starts crying, but you give a poor kid in Africa a ball and he's happy for the rest of his life. So it's really perspective is kind of interesting how it really affects how we act, and we always are taking things for granted. So I think we should be more appreciative of beautiful things like your bike path there and nice days and stuff and fresh air.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you. And I think I like your point about the little kid who got the ball versus the rich kid with the car, because I can completely see that. And that's sad. That's I think one of the reasons that a lot of times people do missionary work. They go to Africa and they go to those kind of places, but people in Africa, 99% of them are believers in most of those countries. And so you've got the vast majority of them believing. I think the missionary work needs to be really done in the wealthy countries. That's where people are falling away from God.
Yeah. It's the parable where Jesus tells the rich man to sell everything and follow him, and he can't do it.
Yeah. Or he says it's easier to squeeze a camel through a needle than to get a rich man into heaven. And I don't think he necessarily meant rich, but rich at the expense of other people. So greedy. I don't think.
It's he put his material things above Christ. It's not bad to have things, but Christ should be more important. You should be willing to sacrifice your mansion or whatever you've acquired because you want to do the right thing.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And so I want to say hi again to people in the audience. You guys can come in here if anyone is interested, because I have seen Sal in here before, and we were just on here my last channel. So, my last episode. So that was always good. And we've got a couple atheists, it looks like, in the chat who are sort of out there. So do you see any, what's your belief? And I don't know, Converse Contender, he was on here talking about John Walton. I actually haven't read John Walton's take on Genesis, but it's my understanding that he's got a different perception of what Genesis is than the traditional ones that people tend to view. And I'm wondering, do you care about the book of Genesis or have any perspectives on whether it's a global or local flood and whether the earth is however old the earth is? Oh, look, it's Nathan. Pseudo Nathan.
Hey, it's Jake.
Hi.
And P. Mars. I don't know what your first name is, sorry.
Patrick.
Patrick. Hey.
Hi. Yeah, so I just asked P. Mars if he had a take on, and I'm glad you're here, Nathan, because I've got some questions for you. So glad to see Nathan here. Because Nathan wrote a blog.
I guess I take Genesis like kind of allegorical. Like I think it's symbolic to convey deeper meaning. So maybe it was a global flood, maybe it was a local flood. I don't think it's like, it doesn't matter that much, I guess.
Yeah. I can see people have argued both sides, and I think sometimes they're compelling on both sides. And so that, like I think you and I said before, I don't think that's the critical issue for us at the end when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
So Nathan is an agnostic, gone Christian, gone agnostic, maybe coming back to Christianity. That's what I want to ask you, Nathan. Is this true?
The rumors are true, SJ. I'm here to confirm that the rumors are true. We're dropping a 4th album. It's going to feature Jesus. No, I mean, I'm still epistemically agnostic for sure, but I think I want to identify with the Christian tradition rather than like defining myself against it, because I think, I'm really interested in these questions that are to do with theology and philosophy and stuff. And I thought, well, I'd rather do that from as someone who's within the tradition, likes going to church on Sundays, going to Bible studies and things like that, than sort of pretending that I don't care or like any of this stuff, even though I sort of like do really like it, even if I don't agree with all the metaphysical positions that everyone takes, whatever.
Yeah. So you're still on your channel now. You've got a channel you've got a lot of followers. I think are you up to almost 3,000 followers or something like that? And so I know you've got a lot of atheists on your channel, so you might want to tread lightly around those atheists. if you're saying that you like some of the Christian ideas, they might not like that.
Well, I mean, that's partly why I thought it was important to say it in a blog post, because I was like, if this thing's sort of gonna keep growing, I don't want people to just be attracted to my sort of opposition of like bad apologetics and stuff like that, which I intend to keep doing. I don't want people to then just become sort of like tribal atheist. I mean, I guess people can do that if they want, but I don't want my audience to be under any sort of illusions that I then don't like Christianity and don't, like, because I'm going to church myself and enjoy that stuff. And I think it can have a really valuable place for people, even if you're not kind of like sold on what Frank Jurek's got to sell you, whatever. You can still enjoy this other stuff that can be healthy and valuable.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask, what church do you go to? Which denomination?
I've been going to Zoom Church, which it was like a Methodist one for the past like 6 months or so. And then recently I've just started going to an Eastern Orthodox church, which is very different.
Yeah, I've never been to an Eastern Orthodox church. How's that different? Because I honestly don't know anything about them.
I mean, it's the sort of symbolism and liturgy and stuff plays a greater role than in a sort of, a Protestant service, I suppose, is generally more about the sermon and more about like the perhaps modern hymns and things, modern songs, and whereas there's a lot more kind of symbolism and ceremony. The central part of it's what's it called? That it's a really old, like before Vatican 2.0 in Catholicism, they used to have a liturgy that came from, is it Basil of Caesarea or something? I think it's that same liturgy. So it's quite an old sort of ceremony, I suppose, in order of service and stuff. And there's a little bit of a sermon somewhere in there as well as some reading, but it's not so much about the like propositional content of the sermon, as I suppose I'm used to in a Protestant setting, as it is about, I think, the experience of the whole thing, which then culminates in get in communion, and then at the end maybe a general sort of like bit of a message and stuff after all that's done.
So it sounds like it's like Catholic a little bit.
Yeah, it's quite. I found it quite different from Catholicism, though, in that I mean I think I met some Eastern Orthodox. It's a lot more about mystery and stuff like that. I think it's more like Christian mysticism than it is about propositional contents and things, I think.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating, actually. Now, P. Mars and I were both former Catholics, so we have you been to a Catholic church? I know V is from Spain, if I understand, so she's more likely to be Catholic.
Yeah, she's like really culturally Catholic, where they do all the stuff of, carrying around saints and things on holidays and all that sort of stuff.
Catholic churches are the best because they have these beautiful false idols all over the. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, she's. I mean, her family weren't particularly Catholic, but like culturally and stuff. And I think we both have an appreciation for that, but I don't think either of us are as drawn or enjoy like what the Catholic Church has to offer as much as the Eastern Orthodox one does, because I think the Catholics are a bit too caught up in subscribing to their dogmas and stuff, and there's not really the space that I think we want for thinking from.
I don't like the idea of like the mortal sin and then like you can only confess to a priest. That's ridiculous. So it's like they have it where the priest is an intermediary between you and God, and that's not right.
Yeah. No, I think logical, plausible, probable wants to know if you're being legit here, Nathan. If this is a legitimate, and I think you might want to, John. You might want to go take a look at Nathan's blog if you can access that, because I believe it's sincere. I see what you're doing, and I think you're moving in the right direction as far as I can see.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be very surprised. I can't like rule it out if I was ever in the same sort of space that you are with Christianity, but I do think I guess I just wanted to be honest about the value that it does have for me. And I mean, if that means sort of Christians sort of view me with caution because I don't assent to the beliefs and things in the same way that they do, that's okay. I'm just being, I don't think these apologetics arguments and stuff work, but I find value in the Bible and being part of a Christian community and all that sort of stuff. So I wanted to be honest about that rather than. I mean, I've had a bit of pushback from people who watch my channel as well around that. I think
I agree with you about apologetics, because even in the Bible it says like your faith in God shouldn't rest on human wisdom. Because like, what if you, I don't know, became a Christian because of some apologetic, and then you realize, oh, this is actually illogical, and then your faith is gone. Like, so I don't know. I think Paul says like the faith should be based on the power of love to transform people's lives, and like we should convert. Like, I think people were attracted to the original Christians because they would display love, like they had fruits, they would show love, and people wanted to be a part of that.
Yeah, exactly. I've been far more concerned with the practice and what it does for my ethical life than I am about whether like the A or B theory of time is true and whether it makes sense to say that God has this attribute or whatever, because ultimately that doesn't really change anything for me.
Hi, everyone. I want to say hi to Otangelo. So Otangelo, if you're coming in here, I always forget where you're from, but I know you're from somewhere not the United States. So
yeah, I'm Swiss. I was born and grew up in Switzerland, but my parents are Italians. So
yeah, I started off this stream with a Swiss guy's video that I really liked called Lucas. So if you haven't seen that, he's got a channel called Deflate, which is awesome.
No, I've not seen it.
Oh God, that guy.
You guys know each other, right? You got a
No,
little
I'm just
history.
I think he's got some of the worst hot takes on some things, like his responses to Cosmic Skeptic and stuff, which is so bad. But
Otangelo, you made responses to Cosmic Skeptic? Or are you talking about Deflate?
oh, Deflate Lucas, yeah.
Oh, I love Lucas's his responses to Cosmic Skeptic. I was going to say I thought talking about Otangelo, but I haven't heard his.
I don't know what it is about, so.
Yeah, he's really good. He just started a channel last year. He's already got 10,000 subscribers because he's got these little short, really meaty clips, and I think I went on a binge listening to him in the last few days, and so they're good stuff.
Who are you talking about?
Oh, this guy called Deflate. He's a Swiss guy too.
Yeah, maybe you can put the link, so I'll have a look.
That's a good idea. I think I forgot to put the link too, so I'll do that. So yeah, what do you guys want to talk about? So we were talking about atheism, and that atheism isn't. There's a lot of reasons not to be an atheist, and I think right now we've got 3 people who probably kind of agree with me a little bit. Kind of definitely Nathan might be the one on the fence. I don't know.
I mean, when I started to go in Switzerland to an evangelical church, it was for me also a reason to find community. And before that, I went to Catholic center where teenagers met, and I saw absolutely no difference in how they treated each another, than at school. And when I went to that evangelical church, then I really saw the difference, and I think this was important for me actually. So if you find, Nathan, a community where you can make friends and so forth, and you find nice people, I mean, if it's just for that, that's already worthwhile, I would say.
Yeah, I wanted to know the Eastern, now going back to this Eastern Orthodox faith that I know very little about, I do think that one of my coworkers, who's a really super incredibly nice guy, I'm pretty sure he's a Greek Orthodox, and he's I know he's religious. He does volunteer work for his community and all that kind of stuff. And if I just went off his personality alone, I'd say that's a good reason to join that church.
Yeah, I don't know their theology either, so I cannot comment on that.
Well, I do know, I don't think they have the scandals that the Catholic Church has. So if you want the idea that you're going to go to a place that's got a lot of tradition and a lot of history and these beautiful big churches, I think that might be the way to go.
Yeah, they have quite different art and stuff though from the sort of Latin Western Christianity, more into their sort of like golden icons, and their churches tend to be domes rather than like spires as well. So quite different in a few ways.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds interesting. That sounds really interesting. So who's this? Pope Kissing Quarantine? I'm not sure who this is. We'll find out in a sec.
Hello, guys.
Hi there. Who is this?
You can call me Will.
Will, okay. Hello, Will.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
What's with your name and picture?
Well, this is Pope John, I think, II kissing the Quran. So that equal apostasy of the Catholic Church. That's basically why I have this.
Oh, Pope John kissed the Quran? Really?
Yeah, he did.
Pope John. Who's that? Because I'm trying to think.
Do
you mean Pope John Paul?
Pope John. Yeah, Paul the second. Yeah.
Pope John Paul. Okay, I didn't know he did that. Wow. That was back when I was a Catholic.
Oh yeah, he has and he also have a picture of him kissing Muslim feet.
Says he was the first pope to enter a mosque, only pope to have met Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat and Jordan's King Abdullah. Interesting.
That is interesting. I don't know So I know so little about that. I actually think I heard a good argument for the Catholic Church that I actually think is pretty solid. And who said this? Michael Knowles. I don't know if you guys know this guy, but Michael Knowles is a Catholic, and he said one of the reasons that he believes in the Catholic Church and that it's God supported is and I think this is funny, is because it's survived over all these years despite itself. It's just had horrible leaders in so many cases.
Yeah,
it's still here.
There's many Gnostic groups that survived too, so I guess they're the true church too.
Yeah, well, I guess that's true. That's an argument against that. So what's your theological position, Pope kissing Quran?
I'm kind of well, I'm a Baptist, but I'm kind of leaning towards Reformed Baptist. To Reformed position, because I just see the whole libertarian free will as a problem for Scripture, and also from the perspective of God and the universe. I see libertarian free will as a biblical problem.
So Reformed meaning that you would be kind of towards the Calvinist idea? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, kind of Calvinist sovereign grace. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I've got some former Calvinists and Calvinists who've been on my channel before, like Veckel. Veckel's a Calvinist, pretty nice guy. So
I like
Veckel the man.
Yeah, Veckel.
Yeah, Veckel's a good guy.
Yeah. So I think I do have to say I think your thing here is funny, the Pope kissing thing.
and edifying.
There's actually a video of Pope Francis where he says that Christ's death on the cross was a failure, and that's why he died. I mean, he says really weird stuff.
I like there's like a clip of the last Pope hitting someone, and then Jesse Lee Peterson kept airing it and saying, "The Pope is ticked." It was funny.
Yeah, well, I have to say, with the new Pope, one thing about him that I do give him kudos for is the fact that he doesn't ride around in this gigantic Pope mobile and flaunt his wealth. And so,
but pretty interesting quote from Thomas Aquinas. He says, "If any of the Pope were to go worship in the altar of Mohammed, he shall be damned and apostate." And if you look at what Pope Francis did, he kind of worshipped at the altar of Mohammed. So according to one of the doctors of the Catholic Church, he's considered an apostate.
Pope kissing. Are you Ezra from Discord?
No, I'm Salvific Deputy.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Oh, I saw you in the chat, Salvific Deputy. Okay, So yeah, welcome, Darth. How are you?
Hello. I am doing fine. How are you?
Good. So you're pretty active on Discord, more than I think. Like, I don't think you're not on Twitter or anything like that, are you?
I'm logged on under a different name, but I'm not really active. I don't post anything.
Okay, yeah, because I'm not active on Discord, but I think some of you, and I don't know, Nathan, are you? And I guess P Mars had to go, so bye, P Mars. Was good seeing you today. So
yeah, I gotta go too. I gotta run an hour.
Oh wait, who is that? Who said that?
Darth.
Oh, Darth. So you just showed up just for us. So what's going on, Darth? Just.
Oh no, I just realized I have an errand to run in 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So if I had remembered, I wouldn't have popped on. Okay,
no problem. Well, thanks for coming in.
How long are you guys going to be on?
I don't know. I was thinking maybe another half hour or so, something like that. So if you run your errand and come back, and then come on back.
Will do.
All right. So Nathan, it says logical, plausible, probable. He says he just read your post, and he says he guesses he'll accept you and hope God is opening you up to divine once more.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough.
Well, you've got me really interested in thinking about at least checking, because I really enjoy going around to different churches, and I've gone into a number of different denominations just for fun. I think it's interesting, and I never really thought about the Greek one or the Orthodox one, because in my area there's a place called Tarpon Springs that's really heavily Greek, and that's where my friend lives, and I might go up there sometime and just check out one of those churches.
Yeah, I think it'd be an interesting experience, because it is a bit different. Be interesting to hear what you think.
Yeah, and I think that'd be good. So we've still got Otangelo, Pope kissing, and I guess Darth. I think he didn't. He said he had to go on an errand, but I think he left his thing here.
Did I just saw Darth putting his cam by accident?
Yeah, I think you did
for the first time.
Hopefully Tom Rabbit doesn't get that. Maybe I should. I can clip that out of this video if anyone wants me to do that. If he wants me to do that, I can shorten the video and just do I'll clip him out. So
yeah, you're gonna see that. You're gonna see that on Tom Rabbit profile picture now.
Gosh, that's crazy. So okay, we just lost somebody. Who do we just lose? Oh, we lost Darth. He just took off. So. So he's got his own. Darth has a lot of people following him because he was in this video once, and we kind of got into a little squabble, and then he came back, and then Tom Rabbit picked that up again. So, oh, good, Sal's here.
Does anyone actually buy? I've been thinking about this, that I'm sure he must have deconverted more people, led to more people thinking this is so toxic that I want no part in it, than people who have just gone, yeah, you're right. I have a metaphysical ultimate, and now I'm a Christian. I don't think that I've ever seen that happen. It probably says one or two have, but I don't think Christians should be sort of endorsing the way that he engages with people.
Well, he was great today. I can say that. Yeah. I just think. I think in the past is the hostile thing we try. Actually, that you're bringing up a good topic, because now Sal is here, and the reason I initially had Sal on my channel a long time ago is because I watched him in a debate, and he was so incredibly kind and polite. I thought Sal's demeanor is going to bring people to Christianity. That's the kind of demeanor you want to have. So welcome, Sal.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and greetings, Otangelo, and everyone. It's been a long time since I've seen Otangelo, but you came to mind, SJ, when I was actually starting to look at Friedrich Hayek, and Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell. And I said, I wonder if those are topics SJ would talk on, because I've seen you cover some of those. So,
yeah, I love Thomas Sowell. Milton Friedman, I mean, Thomas Sowell was educated by Milton Friedman.
So, I mean, how much of that have you studied professionally? Is that in your specialty, in your business specialty?
No, it's in this idea of capitalism, which I endorse fully, and I'm anti-socialism. And I used to teach. I don't teach it anymore, but I used to teach an international management class, and so I used to focus on socialism and capitalism and different forms of market. And so I'd studied up on Milton Friedman a long time ago, because people are always talking about how he very much endorses businesses to be in business to make profits more than people and planet. And so people in certain business textbooks had given him kind of a bad name. But now that I've looked into him more, I realize he's actually much better of a person than I ever knew.
Oh, I don't know how free your schedule is, but you're more than welcome to. I was just thinking, because people have been saying, we want SJ on your channel, on my channel, because they really like.
Oh yeah, no, I'd love to come on your channel.
And so that's one topic. And I heard Josh Swamidas is coming on your channel. And the one question I wanted to ask him is whether he believed that Jesus turned water into wine, whether that's a literal miracle in his mind, or fed the 5,000 with loaves, whether Jesus created matter, because that actually does relate.
Oh, did Jesus turn water into wine?
Yeah. And that's actually been something I've been asking some of the others. I said, what would Walton say? What would the others who are theistic evolutionists? Because if they're willing to accept a miracle of special creation in the New Testament, what's preventing them from accepting miracles of special creation if they have evidence that, like, say, abiogenesis required a miracle, the first life? So even if they accept universal common ancestry. There are people, theistic evolutionists like Sai Gart, whom Swami Das cites very favorably, who argue that abiogenesis, the first life, was a miracle. And I just, I was actually curious because it never occurred to me until this year to start asking theistic evolutionists, what do they, if they're Christians, what do they believe about the other miracles in the Bible? Especially. Yeah. So, and I promised myself I'll behave on.
Yeah. Those are good
when
points.
When Josh shows up on your channel, I'm not going to bomb the side chat.
So actually, I was just wondering, because you said that you're anti-socialist.
Yeah.
Would you think that a socialist Christian nation would work, though?
Oh, let me just explain when I say anti-socialist. Every country has some level of what you'd say is socialism in some way. Like, for example, we've got K through 12 schools that are government run. We've got police force, firefighters, all that kind of stuff is taken care of by our government. And I think that that's important. It's the percentage that you decide you allow the government to be taking over certain industries. And so in Venezuela, we've got an example where the government seized a whole bunch of different companies around 2008, 2009. And right now we're seeing the Venezuelans' GDP per capita has taken a nosedive. Many of them are starving. In fact, it's something like over 80% of them are completely starving right now. And so I just look at that as being an extreme, but that being a pretty awful deal. And so it's just, so I'm more of I more endorse free markets and the idea of entrepreneurs and businesses getting a lot of, just running a lot of forms of industry.
Yeah, but yeah, because I've just been starting to look a little bit into politics and stuff like that, recently. But from what I understand of socialists, is kind of like you, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I know very little about it. You basically work, and the government take a part of your salary back to give it back to others. Is that kind of how socialist is?
It's the collective ownership of the means of production. And so socialists tend to say, okay, for example, in a democratic socialist society, which is a place similar to places like Sweden or Denmark or places like that. They call themselves free markets, by the way, but they have a lot of social security safety nets for people. And so when you're in those societies, you pay very, very high taxes, like around 60% on 60,000, the equivalent of 60,000 US dollars in a place like Sweden. But the taxes go towards taking care of your schooling, not just K through 12, but also having free university offerings if you can get accepted to the university, and also free daycare. And so it's called cradle to grave help. And they also take care of your insurance, your health insurance, or just they take care of your health. They fund the health system. And so they're involved in that. And so some people like those kind of systems, but it's really, really high taxes compared to what we have over here.
But because for example, when I work, they always remove 40 something percent of all of my salary. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of what socialists do?
Well, socialists, it just depends on where you're getting the socialism, where it's coming from. So the Venezuelan model is the idea that Hugo Chavez went in there and took over. He took over an oil company, for example, that had 18,000 employees and just replaced them all with his people, and then drove the company into the ground. And he took over other businesses. He took over some tourism businesses and shipping and some cable business. And what happened was he drove them into the ground by requiring that they can't exceed certain prices and that sort of thing to keep prices down. And so that's a little different idea, but he would tax people. But unfortunately now the income's gone so low that he's got to figure out other ways to bring in his money. And that's Maduro. But Chavez was the initial person who did this. And Chavez, he's the initial one who did this. Chavez's family's worth $200 billion. So that gives you an idea of where the money's going in a socialist society. And so it's pretty crazy. I mean, if you go to Denmark, for example, and you want to buy a car, you pay 100% tax on the car, value-added tax. And then the value-added taxes on other products and services in places like Sweden and Norway and Denmark are around 25% on just generally all products. And so it's very expensive to live in that kind of society. And that money that you pay, not only your income tax, like you're referring to, but also value added tax, that ends up going to the services and goods that they provide everybody. And so.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
So it's
All
so
right.
where are you coming from? What country are you in?
I'm in Quebec. I'm in Canada. I'm from, and it's kind of, I would say it's kind of look like, is it socialist here? Because it kind of is.
Canada is a little more socialist. Yeah. You've got universal health care up there, right?
Yeah, when you break your leg or anything like that, you have a cart and you go to hospital for free.
Yeah. I would actually like to have universal health care here, to be honest, because I feel bad when people get really sick and their medical bills are nuts.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that's why like if that's the whole thing of socialist, that you get free care like that, because if you look in the US, there's some time I was looking at this, when you have a heart attack and you need the operation at the heart, it can go up to $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, imagine you get out of your life is basically ruined,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's the really unfortunate thing. It's a lot of times the insurance offsets a lot of that, but so the insurance negotiates deals with the hospitals and things like that, and so they'll offset a lot of those charges, so you don't face that if you're insured. But there are a lot of people who aren't insured, and so that tends to be a bit of a problem and can be very expensive, especially if they don't want to pay any. Maybe they set a cap on what they'll pay for the hospital, and the hospital exceeds the cap. So
yeah. Yeah, that's why healthcare is so great. Like, you just have a cart and you can just get free hospital. But I guess they kind of remove some of it out of your salary, because like for example, I was wondering. I asked my uncle last time how much they remove out of his pay. They remove 40% out of his monthly pay. So, for example, if you do like $10,000, I'm just giving a random number, they would remove him $4,000. So it's kind of a lot when you think about it for free social care.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I just see logical, plausible. I missed that comment. So Caesar's saying with Sal around Josh Swami Das. So Sal, you and Swami Das, do you have a history here?
I think LPP is making fun of the fact it probably wouldn't even be a screaming match because we're just both nerds. So it wouldn't.
That's
what
funny.
happened. We didn't have a history until he was published in the Wall Street Journal, where he was saying that people who take creationist classes should be labeled on their transcripts and just kind of wear that scarlet letter. And I said, that was the last straw, because I see that serves no good. And he's advertising theories like abiogenesis, whom James Tour really called him out on, as being good science. And it's like, well, why don't you label that? And I actually turned it even more. On some of my shows, I said, okay, so you have a 55-year-old man advertising himself as a 6-year-old girl. Is that right? Why don't you demand truth in labeling for that? Because that's unscientific. It's misleading, and that has more damaging effects on society. And I said, why are you picking on your fellow Christians who are creationists, and you're calling it bad science or not consensus science? And just like, that was the last straw. I said, the nice guy in me kind of left at that point, because up until that point, we're just talking about evolution, creation. But when he started getting into the politics of ostracizing creationist Christians out of society and marginalizing them, I did not have any more nice things to say about him. So,
yeah, well,
but I promise I'll behave on your channel when he's there. I'm not going to bomb your chat.
No, I'm not. I listened to part of his debate with James Tour, actually, and I thought that was fascinating. But I'm so unlike you guys. Science is definitely not my thing. And so I just like to listen to you and listen to him and listen to anyone and just appreciate the knowledge, because that's not my field at all of expertise. And so that's, I did want to say, Sal, did you want to tell people, because I don't know if people know your history, you're really interesting in that you, at one point you were a theistic evolutionist, I think, and then you and you were believing in an old Earth,
Yes.
and I think you changed. You came to the young Earth creationist view. So that's kind of unique.
Yes, young cosmos. Well, I was raised in a Catholic home. I went to public school, and that's where I learned evolutionary theory. And they had all these nice pictures of the progression from like simple creatures like bacteria all the way up to the humans. And it actually, I'll argue that, you know, they talk about the transitionals there, and that I'll argue even as a creationist, there are what I would call conceptual transitionals. There is, you can build kind of, if you lay out a series, a bunch of creatures, you can kind of put them in a, kind of sort them in terms of which one's closer to you. And it does look like kind of like a transition. And so these were very compelling pictures. And I had a Collier's encyclopedia where it showed like the primitive creatures evolving into humans, and then the humans through primitive history learning about fire, and then science, and then at the very end you see them flying to space. I said, oh, that's a beautiful picture, eternal progress. And I said, that's kind of a very godly way of looking at the universe. You know, things are just going to get better and better, because that's very, you know, that's inherent in the way we're made up. We want to see things just get better, not worse. Mm-hmm. And I became a Christian at age 15, and I didn't understand a lot. But even then I had doubts about evolutionary theory, because I said, where does consciousness come from? That was my first doubt, was when I was just a few years earlier, I was in high school biology class. I said, you know, for some reason, I just don't see, how is it that chemicals can suddenly have consciousness? And that was the beginning of my doubt. And I found out I'm not the only one who felt that. And then after about 2 years, I got a tract. I was reading some tracts, and I believe they're from Institute of Creation Research. And I was like, yeah, you know, life coming from non-life doesn't make sense. And shortly around also that time, Dr. Reagan was shot, the assassination attempt. I don't know if some people may remember that, but the doctor who operated him was on the board of directors of the Institute of Creation Research, Dr. Benjamin Aaron. I'm just like, wow. So
you're buffering just a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that's, so what you're saying is the way you came into it is because you found evidence for your position.
Yes. So I was an old Earth creationist most of my life, because I'd read books by like Robert Jastrow, The God and the Astronomers, and he was famous for the quote, you know, all these scientists are moving forward, and they're just about to scale the top of the mountain, and they find a bunch of theologians waiting there for centuries. And he was an agnostic, but he was commenting that he found the kind of the reaction of his colleagues very very intriguing, because they seemed to be upset at the idea that the universe had a beginning. Surprisingly, even Quakers, Christians like I think it was Jeans, famous astronomer, they just felt uncomfortable with a God who would be so overtly present. And I know I do. I see the buffering there. So I said, Lord, you know, my reading of Genesis is that it doesn't quite line up with what I'm reading in the science books, but it's close enough. And I kind of just left it at that. And I said, you know, I'd be willing to accept a more literal reading if there's variable speed of light. And around about 21 years ago, I began to hear reports of that.
I said,
Oh, really? I didn't.
Yeah. And then so
didn't know about that.
I nearly had my loss of faith 20 years ago, and then I started coming back through the first of all because I read Bertrand Russell, and he was saying he had this beautiful essay, A Man's Freedom to Worship or something. I don't have the title exactly there. A Free Man's Worship, and he was saying maybe I could get the quote because it's too powerful not to. Free man's. This one turned me back to the Christian faith. So we were talking about how you read Bertrand Russell.
Yeah, well, that turned you back to the Christian faith. That's hilarious.
And so I also read it, but in a different way. So he said, it's here. Bertrand Russell, A Free Man's Worship. So this is the one, and it echoes Randolph, a free man's worship. Such an outline, but even more purposeless, more void of meaning, is the world which science presents for our belief. Amid such a world, if anywhere, our ideals henceforth must find a home. That man is the product of causes which had no prevision of the end they were achieving. That his origin, his growth, his hopes, and fears, his loves and his beliefs are but the outcome of accidental co-locations of atoms, that no fire, no heroism, no intensity of thought and feeling can preserve an individual life beyond the grave, that all labors of the ages, all the devotion, all the inspiration, all the noonday brightness of human genius are destined to extinction in the vast death of the solar system. And I was like, wow. If that is the viewpoint of atheism, I'm going to take what little scraps of evidence I have and go with it, because he said it so eloquently, and I'm like, yeah, there's no answers in atheism. I'm going to at least, he being the foremost atheist, that one of them at the time, I said, okay, you've leveled with me what your viewpoint has to offer, which is nothing. And I really like Bertrand Russell to this day. He's my favorite atheist. And I said, I know this sounds funny. Thank God for Bertrand Russell for saying that, because that led me back to the Christian faith. But then I started getting into intelligent design, and I got in, is a miracle. I wanted to share it. I started a university group in 2004, and I said, God, I want national attention. I ended up being on the cover of Nature. That's good. And I was like, why would they grab some random college student and put him on the cover story of the prestigious scientific? I said that was a God thing. That was definitely a God thing. And it said there that I was going to go to school to study cosmology, and I did. I went to Johns Hopkins. I studied astrophysics and cosmology, general relativity, quantum mechanics, plasma physics. And in my cosmology class, and I also studied under some other physics professors, and there was this kind of discontent with the Big Bang. And I said, okay, there's a chance then that young Earth and young cosmos creationism could be true. And before I go any further, I wanted to say Hugh Ross is one of my big favorites. I'm a big fan of Hugh Ross. I still am. When he came to the University of Maryland, I came out and thanked him personally, because I said, I nearly left the faith. You helped me get back, you and your organization. He had someone working for him by the name of Richard Dean. Mm-hmm. And so we had an interesting conversation on quasars, because that was his specialty in astrophysics. And but despite that, I said, I was sitting in cosmology class. I said, I don't think the Big Bang's going to hold together. And I had professors and graduate students saying, and they were talking about variable speed of light. And so because I worked and I began studying the theory of genetic deterioration, that humans couldn't have been here very long,
And even among some old Earth creationists, they were saying that they think that human life is relatively recent, of miraculous origin. I said, well, you know, it's just kind of aesthetic to think maybe everything's young. And so in 2019, 2020, 2021, things are now coming out in the peer-reviewed literature that are questioning many pillars of the Big Bang, if not the entire Big Bang itself.
That's interesting.
Some of them were from my school, and some of the young Earth creationists who were not very nice to Hugh Ross or just gloating. I'm just like, yeah, guys, that's not cool. He's a great guy. But that being said, I actually felt kind of sad because I really like Hugh Ross, and I said, well, you know, the science is kind of coming apart for something that he built his ideas on, which is the Big Bang. And I've seen that for like the last 20 years. Everyone has sort of known it, but now even Nobel Prize winners like Roger Penrose are starting to raise red flags. So it's kind of exciting right now because everything could be kind of like rewritten as far as our understanding of the origin of the universe. And but I think the one thing everyone can agree on, Hugh Ross, myself, others, is that the universe is excellently fine-tuned.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry if our connection's bad. I don't know if I'm still.
No, I
buffering
think I think it's pretty good right now. At one point you had a little bit of buffering, but I think it's, unless it was just my computer, it could have been my computer acting up on me. So.
Well, thank you for asking.
But I think what you might say, see, that's one of the things that I think on your position, it does require that God interacted in some sort of miraculous way, maybe 6,000 or 10,000 years ago, though. Would you say that's fair? Because I think that's what your question was when you were saying you wanted to question people like Swami Das, if they say that if you look at the New Testament and Jesus has all these miracles like walking on water and that kind of stuff where he's performing stuff that goes against nature, then you go back to the Old Testament. So some of the stuff that you're looking at, you'd say that there's some miraculous intention in there. Is that fair?
It's more specific than that, actually. It is acts of special creation, not just walking on water, where he actually transforms matter to something else. I mean, transforming water to wine is like a macroevolution, if you will, or actually creating matter when you're multiplying the loaves and the fishes to feed the 5,000.
Okay.
And so it's like, I wanted to confront him and say, okay, do you believe that? Do you believe that God can take matter and just create something? And I was really curious, and a discussion came around. It's like, well, what would the theistic evolutionists like John Walton, etc.,
or Saigar,
because if one can accept that, it's like, well, why can't you accept the origin of life being a miracle? Like, let's just start with the first cell. We don't have to say everything, but just how about the first cell? Would you be willing to accept that? Because I had a show where I had 4 PhDs, very senior scientists on my channel, and we were criticizing abiogenesis. And I'm just like, yeah, we were all laughing at the abiogenesis industry as being either delusional or fraudulent because it doesn't agree with basic textbook science. And I said, yeah, all 3 of them were professors in chemistry and biology, biochemistry, organic chemistry, nanomolecular organic chemistry. And then we had a biomedical engineer from MIT and Harvard in Rob Stadler. And we were promoting the book, The Stairway to Life, that was written by a molecular biologist, also from an Ivy League school, Harvard postdoc, who was selected by a Nobel Prize winner in George Smith. And we were having, I'm just like, wow, this is a change of what I've ever, in the years, it always seemed like kind of a marginal thing, but then I'm meeting all these very senior chemists and scientists in relevant fields criticizing abiogenesis. I'm just like, this is great, because then it's very obvious by any standard of science that this is at least a statistical miracle. And why don't we just accept it as a miracle of God?
Yeah,
because Swami Das is saying this is good science. I'm just like, no, you have no theoretical reason to believe it except by pure faith against everything we know in chemistry and biology. And we have no experiments that confirm it. And James Turr called him out on the RNA world. And so I'm like, okay, at what point will you, Swami Das, accept that something could be a miracle? Because right now you're insisting on a natural, God using natural means to create this. You have no proof of that. Nothing in our science or physics or chemical theory says that this is even reasonable. So at what point will you say that that was a miracle of God? If he'll say no point, I can at least, he'll be forthcoming, but I would have issue if he says this is good science, or that the promissory note of a future discovery is really likely. I have serious problems with that, because I remember when I was in junior high, they were advertising the Urey Miller experiment. And in the 50s, they were like, everyone was saying we're at the brink of solving the problem of the origin of life. The trend has gotten worse with each year.
Yeah, I think I saw James Tour on that, and some of the stuff that he explains it in a way that a lay person like me can understand, which I really appreciate. So I just wanted to say something really quickly to something else that you said, that I like what Martin Sanders is saying. I'm not familiar with Martin, so welcome here, Martin. Says Dawkins said something along the lines of reading the Bible turns people into atheists. The contrapositive is also true. I found reading Bertrand Russell increased my faith in Christianity. So funny.
Well, to me, it's actually... Do you read a lot of C.S. Lewis, SJ? Because I'm starting to try to read C.S. Lewis, and Otangelo, I'll yield the floor.
I love C.S. Lewis. I've read a ton of C.S. Lewis.
I mean, what is a big driving motor for me to increase my faith is my constant exchange with atheists, because that's how our faith is actually tested. And what we see is that their counter arguments simply, they do not withstand scrutiny. And so we have basically from all angles the challenges, and it just exposes how naturalism is bankrupt and how theism is substantiated. So at least with me, it works well.
Yeah, I think, and I just to highlight what both of you are saying right now is, and I think I can agree with that, because I told Sal this a while ago. An atheist challenged me one time on Twitter to read Bertrand Russell. He thought that was the creme de la creme of the atheists. And so I read Why I'm Not a Christian by Bertrand Russell, and I was like, this is it? This is all they have? This is awful. And I actually remember I was a little concerned, because I thought, oh my gosh, what are they going to say that's going to just knock me off my position? And I read that and I thought, well, if this is their best, man, we're looking pretty good. So sorry, atheists, if you guys are in the chat right now and you just want to shoot some arrows at me, but I have to admit, if there's anything better than Bertrand, send it my way. I'll look at it, and I'll try to be as fair as possible. I heard Graham Oppie's pretty good, and I haven't read any of his stuff, so maybe that's the one to look at.
Well,
So
I mean,
you know what? Oh, sorry, Sam.
Go on.
I was going to ask, do you know what Russell's theory of denoting is?
His theory of denoting?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Never heard of it.
Do you know what Russell's theory of types is?
No.
Not at
Go
all.
ahead and enlighten us, Nathan.
Just to say that those are two of the positions in philosophy he's most famous for. And I think if you're not familiar with them, I'm a bit skeptical of how much Russell, you've read. It seems more like Russell's being used there as a rhetorical device as like an avowal of prior skepticism thing. So like, I'm so skeptical, I engage with the best of what they've got to offer, everything Bertrand Russell's got to say, right? I'm intimately familiar with his best arguments.
No, I never said that.
Well,
Nathan, I have to say, I just said
that you said that, SJ.
No, I didn't, because all I said was I was told to read this one thing, Why I'm Not a Christian, which I did. That's all.
Yeah, and that was actually a radio show that was transcribed. But I think in Sal's case, it seems a little bit dishonest to me to be like, I mean, maybe that's a bit strong, but to be like, I'm intimately familiar with Russell's philosophy and what he's got to say, yet not familiar with two of the things that he's most famous for, right?
Well, I knew of him through my study of mathematics, actually, and computer science. And so he's a very respected name. I'm sorry to be insulting, but I don't regard philosophers in the modern day very highly, but I respected his mathematical stuff. But that passage there,
his theory of types is his mathematical stuff.
Well, I knew it from Russell's paradox, and I have that in my book on mathematical foundations. They never described it in terms of pipes.
Did you say theory of pipes or types?
Yeah, also the other thing is,
it's how he
overshadowed that was Gödel's work that proved the Principia Mathematica as faulty, and that was the big deal. So sorry, I haven't read the theory of pipes, because in mathematics Gödel takes a lot more priority, and it was really framed in terms of refuting Russell's Principia Mathematica.
Could you tell me what Gödel's incompleteness theorem states? Sal. There are
questions that we cannot formally prove that beyond the power of the axioms. Now, he had it more formally stated than I just stated it.
What's the form of the proof?
I don't know it offhand, but
do you think
relevant.
Do you think you should be
you want me to pull out
mentioning
I have shelves of math books if you want me to pull that out.
Have you read them?
And I'll show you that.
Have you learned what they have to say, or have you just bought them?
I did not learn, because mathematics was an optional elective. So did you learn what it had to say? I mean, are you a mathematician? Are you a meta-mathematician?
I'm a software engineer, but I can tell you the form of the proof.
Well, that's irrelevant to the question of whether God exists or not. And I thought, and whether this is what Russell said, the world which science presents for our belief. And he said, so I just listed all the things that, from Russell's viewpoint, such an outline, but even more purposeless, more void of meaning, is the world which science presents for our belief. I don't know that we need to have the theory of pipes or anything else that you mentioned. I mean, that statement stands on its own as far as articulating Russell's view. Is that a misrepresentation? Is that dishonest for me to point out that he said,
I think within the 30 minutes
even
or
more
so that you were
purposeless or
monologuing,
void of meaning is the world which science presents for our belief? Does that misrepresent Russell?
No, but my point is that within the 30 minutes or so you were monologuing, you sort of made out, about what an intellectual academic you were. But I think you were I don't actually think you understand.
I didn't say I'm an intellectual academic. I was just saying that was my journey.
So I don't think you actually understand a lot of the stuff you're mentioning. And then I think it becomes part of this narrative to sort of sell confidence to people. This idea that you're familiar with, all these different topics and things, but then when actually questioned on them, it seems like,
all right. So I'm not that familiar with it. Did I misrepresent what I just quoted?
Well, I mean, you quoted what you quoted.
So you can assume that I'm unconfident, that I'm stupid and uneducated. Does that change anything?
Well, I mean, we could what your actual argument seemed to be is that you really didn't like what Russell, it didn't appeal to you. Therefore, he's wrong. I mean,
does that appeal to you that the world is void of meaning? Does that appeal to you that the world, in his view, is purposeless and void of meaning? Is that appealing to you?
No, it's not. But does that make it false, though, whether or not it's appealing to me?
Let me ask you guys a question. Let me just interrupt here, because I looked up Bertrand Russell's theory of types. I guess it is. It says it just to say what it is. It says it deals with logical paradoxes arising from the unrestricted use of predicate functions as variables. And I'm wondering, are these theories that you mentioned, Nathan? Are these with respect to God, or are these different theories that Russell is?
It's how Russell solves that's how Russell solves what Sal said, Russell's paradox, or the Barber paradox, is with the theory of types. I suppose the reason that I'm raising this is because
Sal's, thought you said types.
Yeah. No,
sorry.
It's because Sal's mentioning, he's sort of name dropping, I think, to sort of, it's sort of like if I went, Thomas Aquinas, Augustine, St. Paul the Apostle, Martin Luther. Yeah, like back when I read all those guys last week, I had some thoughts, and like Kant, you were cool, bro. Like, but it doesn't actually mean, like if I've not integrated any of what they've got to say and synthesized it into my thought, it's sort of pointless to bolster people's confidence in what I've got to say if I don't understand the main parts of their philosophy. So it's, if I was like, got every book William Lane Craig wrote, and I'm confident that atheism is true, I couldn't tell you what the cosmological argument says. I think that's good reason to sort of not take me as an authority on atheism, if that were the case. And I'm going to say that that's sort of the same with a theist who's saying, or Russell, who's meant to be one of these best atheist philosophers. Well, I'll tell you what, read everything he's got to say, and none of it's even damaging, and then you don't even know what his main positions are on things, what he's most famous for. That's
Can I quickly interject? I heard the first time about Gödel's incomplete theorem to Perry Marshall. I did put the link in the side chat, and basically what I learned by him, I can quote here: anything you can draw a circle around cannot explain itself without referring to something outside the circle, something you have to assume but cannot prove. Basically, thinking more about this lead me to listen to William Lane Craig, which said that scientism is an inadequate epistemic approach to make research in regards of origin. So we see all the time atheists requiring proofs that God exists, and this is the right approach. We can prove what is beyond the physical universe. So it is a wrong question. Atheists cannot prove either that the physical natural world is all there is.
Well, I mean, Gödel's incompleteness theorem, right, is a syntactic proof, right, within a logical system. So first we're going to have to, I mean, who here knows the difference between a syntactic and a semantic proof in logic?
I don't study that. That's not my field.
Well, there's no point, I don't think, in that. This is one of the worst features of apologetics, right? When people want to sort of get the names from like big brain stuff and pretend that they've like synthesized and integrated it into this like theistic worldview when they just simply haven't. And it's just terrible that people do that. And it's so far away from the idea of like, I'm sure there's some homeless people or something, right, around the street. Go and help them rather than like pretending that you read Kurt Gödel and understood it.
That wasn't my claim. I was just saying this is what did it for me. Very simple. There's no answers in atheism. And I said all I did is at that point I took what little scraps of evidence and reasons for believing in the Christian faith and went with that. It's that simple. I wasn't trying to prop myself up as some great intellectual or name dropping. I was just saying that was I was just pointing out that was a very persuasive argument by Russell to say that atheism has zero answers. Nothing has changed that. Do you believe atheism has? See, that's the point. Do you believe atheism has answers for you? And
answers
for me,
to what questions?
Origins.
Any question, like what's right and wrong? Is there purpose? Why do you live? Ethics.
I could say like the whole origins, meaning, morality, destiny, purpose, all that stuff. That's what's nice about Christianity.
Atheists do have answers to those questions that they at least find intellectually satisfying, yes.
So atheism's lack of belief. Therefore, this is what's right.
Can I quote here quick? Naturalism cannot ground fundamentally anything, that is existence itself, the meaning of life, the value of human life, moral values, knowing what is objectively or ontologically true in regards to reality, sound reasoning, logic, intelligibility, the mind and consciousness, and uniformity in nature. All these things cannot be explained through strong atheism or naturalism. There is no grounding for these things.
Why is Cornell realism false, Otangelo?
What?
Why is Cornell realism false?
I've never heard that term.
Well, that is the most popular naturalist, moral realist position. So if you've never heard of it, and then to claim that
it's about morality. Okay, morality. Okay. Well, I would say that as soon as you remove an entity which is above us, which instantiates what is right and wrong, then we are just basically talking about personal opinion. My opinion is that torturing babies is okay. Your opinion is that torturing babies is not okay. Who is right? It's just my opinion against yours.
Well, that's one possible interpretation of what morality is. That would be natural, right? But that's not what all naturalists believe. I mean, like I just said, that's not what Cornell realists believe, right?
Well, the thing is,
let me just ask Nathan really quickly. And I'm not familiar with Cornell realism. I am familiar with moral realism just in general. And so how do they ground realism, the Cornell realists, assuming that that's coming from a naturalistic position?
They say that it's just natural states where moral facts are natural facts.
So how is moral, like, is a rock moral or immoral?
Well, I mean, a rock probably isn't a moral fact, right? But in terms of like someone who's torturing babies for fun, there's moral facts in that situation that it's wrong, and that it's objectively wrong for them to do that, and all the entities that are involved in the story that they're going to tell are natural entities. My point here, though, is that in terms of saying just throwing out there, it's so hubristic to throw out there atheists can't do this when you've not even begun to understand what they actually believe.
Well, let us just get to. I really want to dig down on this realism idea with you for a second here, because I want to figure out exactly what you're saying here. So you're saying that the foundation upon which realism is based, and this idea that we have objective morality, objective truth, objective duties to do what's right, the foundation of that is grounded in an assertion that we have natural laws.
No, not in the assertion that we have natural laws, and that all the facts that are involved are natural facts. There's no like supernatural goodness. There's no like God's commands or anything. But Cornell realists would still be committed to that it is genuinely and should motivate us normatively wrong for us to do something in a certain situation. I'm saying that that's one metaphysical story that can be told that accounts for morality, and the fact that Otangelo is not actually even aware that that's a possible available position, yet is willing to say that all people who are atheists don't have these things. Well, they'd disagree. They'd say they do have those things, right?
But so see, Nathan, I still really want to figure out this Cornell realism, because I don't know it, and I have studied a bit on moral realism, and so I need to know more about this position. So they're just making an assertion that we have these moral ideas, these moral obligations, without giving us any sort of foundation for that. Like we're saying there's a transcendent source of that, and that's the reason why the moral laws that we have transcend people, cultures, time, all that kind of stuff. We're saying there's a moral lawgiver who's our foundation, and so this philosophy is just saying that the law itself is the foundation, is what I understand.
I am looking here up in Wikipedia Cornell realism, and it has to do with moral realism, and it says here moral realism is the view that there are mind independent and therefore objective moral facts that moral judgments are in the business of describing. This combines a cognitivist view about moral judgments, that they are belief-like mental states in the business of describing the way the world is, a view about the existence of moral facts, that they do in fact exist, and a view about the nature of moral facts, that they are objective, independent of our cognizing them or our stance towards them. This contrasts the expressivist theories of moral judgment and so forth. The problem which I see in all this, I mean, they can make all these claims, but that doesn't mean that there is a real foundation which instantiates these ought to be's of what is right and wrong, which is beyond or above us.
Well, yeah, and that's true. And they would say that you don't need that in order to have moral realism, right? Because they have a different story. Obviously, you disagree with them. Otherwise, you wouldn't be a theist, right? But
I just have a quick question, Nathan. can you unequivocally prove that Cornell realism follows from atheism? Is it unequivocal? If not, I'm not interested.
Why?
It's just that simple. I mean, if you're going to try to argue that it's a logical conclusion and it's inevitable, then
no, I'm not arguing
okay,
that.
if you're not, then it's just a faith statement at that point. Is that not right? At this point,
does the Trinity follow from the assertion God exists?
Have you adopted Cornell realism yourself?
Does God exist entail penal substitution? Does God exists entail a Trinity? Does God exists entail Jesus turned water into wine? Because if it doesn't, then I'm just not interested in anything you've got to say, Sal.
Okay, that's fine. I was just curious. Do you accept Cornell realism as true?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, one of the things that I think, Nathan, I think one of the reasons you don't accept that is because you realize there has to be a transcendent source, and you can't, otherwise it's just making a circular argument by saying the moral fact is also the source. The fact we have these facts, they exist, and it's also the source of our moral facts. It's just arguing in circles.
I think the good is a non-natural thing, but I would never make the statement that atheists don't have a story to tell, because that's just false. That just shows that I'm ignorant of of philosophy, basically. That just shows that I've not taken the time to educate myself.
Well, Nathan, what I constantly see is atheists making a leap of borrowing from our Christian faith and saying that they have meaning in life, that they have morals, that they know what is right and wrong, but they don't have actually the grounding based on their worldview.
Well, they don't have God grounding, but they have grounding that they're satisfied with. They think they might have a more plausible story that accounts for what they mean by the good. So it's not like they don't have an account. It's not like they think they're just saying meaningless utterances. I mean, maybe our theorists do, which is a subset of atheists.
Well, Nathan, you've just pointed out why I'm not going to waste my time. You
I'm
raised
not wasting my time with you either, because none of your
there are many things to study that are worth, just for me personally, that are worth more time than investing in ideas you don't even believe. And then so you can,
as none of your theological beliefs
ignorant of this, but you haven't given a lot of motivation to study it.
I'm just
you don't even believe it yourself, and then you're raising the topic.
So I want to just say hi to Danny. Danny just came in, so.
Well, I think Sal's position is that you don't think that anything follows from atheism, right? Like, it's not like, on your view, atheism, therefore we have moral, objective values and duties, right? Is that your position, Sal?
No, I was just trying to quote some atheists themselves, like William Provine or Randolph Richardson or any number. I mean, you know, the other thing is, if they don't have a unified view on this, that also is like, okay, you can't take just the fact that there's a conflict there also says you can't take that there is no God, therefore this is true for very big questions about life. So I'm just pointing out, I don't think I'm misrepresented.
Wait, when atheists tell me, you know, I'm no Christian, but when atheists tell me that Christianity is false because they can't agree on certain religious principles or doctrine, right? I say that doesn't make any sense. So I'm gonna extend the same criticism to you, right? Just because atheists don't agree and they can't on the meaning of life or what, you know, these deep questions, right? That doesn't pose a problem for atheism. It doesn't pose a problem for Christians that they don't agree on doctrine, right? I think that
well, let me say this: the difference about Christianity, it's making claims about historical events. Christ rose from the dead.
I agree with you that
Christianity. The fact we may disagree about doctrine isn't really, at least for me, the issue. And if that makes an atheist not believe, okay, I respect that. But I was just pointing out that I've not heard an atheist make a compelling argument. There is no God, therefore this is the right thing to do. Therefore there's meaning in life.
Well,
I've never heard them make that, and I was just saying that doesn't appeal to me. I'd rather go with something, and it's like, okay, it's also a no-go theorem, meaning for them to prove that atheism, that there is no God. Okay, so they lack belief. I respect that. But for them to actually insist for them to prove that there is no God, they'd have to be God themselves. And then also, they have no answers for life. And I was just saying, at a personal level, I'd rather go with what little evidences, that time in my life, what little evidences and reasons I had to believe, because that something at that point is better than nothing. I asked the question of atheists, my friends and colleagues. I said, what do you have to offer me? Why will my life be better? And if they don't have good answers for that, there's no reason for me to hang around. I'd rather take my chances and go somewhere else and at least try. So I didn't say that they were necessarily wrong, but I said, even if they're right, there's nothing there for me, but there's a chance. What little chance I had, I would rather go with that, because then there's at least a little bit of hope. And ever since then, I've been more. So I'm not declaring an absolute proof that atheism fails. It failed me in the sense that the atheists have told me they had nothing to offer me.
I understand that. I mean, you said
I posed that question to Matt Dillahunty. What does your worldview have to offer the Christians here?
But that's what I want to try to respond to here, right? And you said a lot, and there's a lot that I could talk about. But let's just zero in on what this proposition that atheism doesn't offer anything, right? And I'm inclined to agree with you, right? Atheism doesn't dictate your morality, your politics, the way you look at life in terms of whether there's cosmic meaning or not. But I think that if something like that is true, that's going to be true of theism as well, right? Because you can be a theist and have all sorts of views about meaning, morality and politics, right? The point is that Christianity, I agree with you, makes a lot more claims than atheism or theism, right? That there is a common denominator between Christianity and theism, but Christianity multiplies the number of claims like 1,000 when compared to just a simple theism, right? And I think that I would agree with you that to the extent that atheism doesn't make a lot of claims, doesn't offer a lot in terms of morality and all this stuff, but I don't think theism simpliciter doesn't offer anything either, right? Maybe Christianity makes all sorts of claims about the world and morality and where you are in the midst of it, but theism nor atheism offer a lot.
Yeah, let me just, I see some stuff in the chat. There's a huge thing going back and forth. I like all of you guys are making good comments here, but I just wanted to comment on something with Epicurus, because I see that Greta Thunberg, and it's a nice play on that woman who's got this belief in climate change, and I mean, belief that we need to get out there and fix climate change right now. But the thing I wanted to talk about is this idea of, is God willing or able? Is he neither willing or able to remedy the problem of pain, for example, or the problem of suffering? And I think the answer, just to add kind of to what Danny's saying, is in Christianity, because looking at Jesus and what he had to endure on the cross, sure, was God willing and able? He could have sent his angels, stop him, do all that kind of stuff, stop these people from spitting on Jesus and crowning him with thorns. Or did he decide to just let this happen? And he let the suffering happen. And through Jesus, we can actually understand the problem of suffering. That's why I was adding, it's better than theism. Theism doesn't really help us explain the problem of suffering, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm just saying that the whole atheism, theism thing theism is not just simpliciter, Sal. It's just as worthless on your view as atheism, right? You're wanting something more than just there's a God, right? Because just the simple fact that there's a God doesn't get you this special sense of fulfillment, right? You could have an evil God after all, right? I think the point is that I think you find refuge in Christianity for what you cited your reasons and your evidence and whatever, but I just don't see how the criticism of atheism that you're making doesn't just as well apply to theism.
No, I think you have some subtleties in what you said that are important to address. But at that point, in my life, I said it's either the Christian God or no God, because the other religions and viewpoints of kind of God, I felt that they were written by men. And the thing that influenced me with that was John Polkinghorne, who was a very renowned particle physicist. He became a ordained priest after he retired from being a physicist. And I was thinking, why? I need to learn why. And he said the thing that distinguishes Christianity from all other religions is it makes bold historical claims. The first, of course, being Christ's resurrection. And then there are other things. So that right there made me dismiss all the other kind of supernatural viewpoints. I said that one, Christianity, it's either atheism versus Christianity. The others seemed like made up religions, certainly Zeus and Thor. So when when atheists say atheism's lack of belief, it's like, I get that. I lack belief in Zeus. I lack belief in Aphrodite or Athena or any of these other Greek gods, but there's something about Christianity. So kind of getting back to your question, at that point I said, okay, is it really atheism versus the Christian God? And so I'm glad you brought this up. So I said, atheism had no answers for me. And Randolph Richardson, in his debate with John Maddox, and then an after show sometime thereafter, he crystallized it. He said there are no answers in atheism. Atheism actually doesn't have any answers for anything. And I said, that encapsulates kind of my view, and I think a view of a lot of others. And I talked to Amy Newman and other in a debate, and I think she kind of agreed with that. And I've seen other people say, yeah, that actually logic, that's a correct statement.
Well, first atheists, then 90% would say in the end of the conversation, well, we don't know, and it's perfectly fine not to know. We are honest about that.
I think part of what Nathan was trying to say is that let's just think about something like quantum mechanics. What if I said I'm dismissing quantum mechanics because it doesn't account for what I'm looking for in life. It doesn't fulfill any kind of cosmic meaning that I sense, right? And it just seems like it's a category error, right? That quantum physics has to do with the question of whether I have cosmic meaning, right? So in the same way that when you're saying, oh, well, the atheism doesn't account for this intuition that I have meaning, and that, and that there's like real moral facts in life and such. I just feel like it's the same sort of category error. Of course, it's not going to. Atheism doesn't make a lot of claims other than to say that there's no God, right?
But that's precisely the problem. If there is no God, then you have no grounding for all these things which we experience, and we know about them either intuitively or by our conscience. And a God explains these things.
Yeah, and that's where the discussion goes, right? Because I don't think so, right? And so we can have a debate about that in a sense, right? I'm just saying that atheism is not meant to be a position, just like quantum mechanics. It's not to be a set of propositions about the world that give you an account of cosmic meaning. And I don't think theism does that either, because Otangelo, Sal, you're a little bit different than Sal, but Otangelo, you argue for a near deistic God, right? Sal at least talks about Christianity and the historicity of Christ. You go around talking about this generic sense of God that's ethereal and like that doesn't really necessarily have any kind of interaction with my personal life. And I'm saying that why would that God account for my intuitions that the universe is meaningful, right? Maybe Christianity, at least Sal has an interesting position that, look, maybe there's some historical facts about the world in which, might lend credence to the view that God does have a body in the form of Jesus, and that he loves, there's a picture there on deism or your generic, designer argument, right? How would that account for moral truth and cosmic significance? I just don't see how.
The fact that I don't talk in every stream about the Christian God doesn't mean that I am not a Christian or that I don't endorse Christianity. I am a Christian, and when the opportunity arises, then I am perfectly fine to defend the Christian faith and what I actually believe. So
let me just butt in really quickly, because I keep seeing this Greta Thunberg saying things like, we have no evidence of Jesus outside the Bible. We don't have any evidence that Jesus is God. And I just wanted to point out to her what I have right here on the screen. I'll do this really quickly, but these sources are 9 sources within 150 years of Jesus's resurrection, which we believe is around the year 33, who give us enough evidence alone. These are hostile sources towards Jesus. These are not Christians. And just from them alone, we have plenty of evidence to support Jesus' resurrection, because we have, he was executed and crucified according to a number of different sources who are hostile to Christians. He died on the eve of the Passover. He was buried in a tomb, and that was according to Jewish customs. Deuteronomy goes back with that. But Jesus did bury malefactors according to Josephus and Tacitus. He goes on. He claimed to be God according to Celsus, and his followers made an oath not to commit any bad deeds. Christians who refused to recant were martyred according to Pliny the Younger and Trajan. He was wise, a wise king. He had miraculous powers. And he existed from a number of different people. And so these are all outside of the Bible. And we also know that according to Josephus, that Jesus' followers said they saw him. He appeared to them alive after 3 days after the crucifixion. And so I just wanted to show you guys that we have plenty of evidence to support Jesus' resurrection. I make lots and lots of videos on that. So if you guys are interested in that, please come back, because I would gladly get into a debate with anybody on that topic.
Yes, Greta also writes here, if an omniscient and omnipotent God creates a being that it knows will break its arbitrary rules and then torments that being for eternity, that is the very embodiment of evil. How would you respond to that?
That God makes somebody that he knows is going to do evil and stuff like that?
Yes, he created Adam and Eve and gave them free will, but since he has full knowledge, he knew they would actually disobey and then eat from the fruit, and then there would come the fall and all evil and tragedies, and people would reject God and go to hell. And she thinks that God is evil because he created that kind of world. So how would you respond to that?
Oh, that's a good, that's a good point. I think I'll give Greta, that's definitely something that people want to ask, and they wonder why are we in this world and why do we see evil in the world? I would say that a lot of the reasons that God does everything he does is because he's building us to be strong spiritual beings. And he is not here to give us this cushy life. The earth is about building strong spiritual beings. And unfortunately, that does require pain and suffering. And you'll find that in the places in the world where people are suffering the most, for example, places in Africa and the places in the world where people are suffering least have one big dichotomy from studies like the Globe study that was put out in over 60 countries and thousands of people. They found that the most suffering countries, people have the highest levels of humane orientation, which is benevolence and universalism, which is caring for the other people in your in-group and caring for the planet and animals and that kind of thing. And so why do people have the highest levels of benevolence in places that the most suffering exists? Because they have very strong spirits, and that's what God's doing. That's part of his work.
Yeah, I would say that I believe that God created the world so that we as free beings could actually know him and know his goodness. And if there would be no evil, then there would be only good. And we wouldn't know what is evil, and we wouldn't have known about God's love and his redemptive power. So there is
That's a good answer.
That.
I like that.
I wanted to say, I felt Danny did characterize my view. He's definitely making an attempt to characterize my views accurately, and tying things to historical events is very important for me, physical historical events. And I just posed this question to people that wherever they are, I said, okay, if you were that blind beggar in John chapter 9, you really had no prospects or hope for anything. You're begging for your food each day. You don't know what the future holds. And someone comes along and heals you and reveals to you that he's the Messiah that you've been hearing about. Would you follow him the rest of your life? And I thought, I was naive enough to think people would say yes. But then I asked Tracy Harris on Atheist Experience. I asked Matt Dillahunty that same question. I've asked others. I asked T-Jump. I said, would you follow Jesus if he worked a miracle and you were that blind beggar and now you could see, and he invites you to follow him the rest of your life? Would you? This is a very simple question, because I think if someone is going to say no, then it's like, well, there's no amount of arguments that'll ever convince you. And it's like, okay, that's where you are. I said, that's not where I am. I would follow Jesus the rest of my life. I mean, for me, it's that simple. To me, that will divide people that really want to follow after the Lord versus those that don't. And we don't have as many facts accessible to us as we would like. And so where would you take your risks and run with it? Because what I found is so many decisions in life are based on making decisions with less information than you'd like to have. And so that's kind of where I'm at. And when Bertrand Russell and other atheists said, well, there's nothing there for you, Sal. It's like, okay, you've made the decision easy. I'll go where at least I feel there's a chance. They may not feel that way, but that was enough for me. I said, this means that much to me. I'll take the chance.
That makes sense to me. I was busy typing up the change in this description here for the video.
and I asked Matt Dillahunty, I said, you tell the Christians out there what atheism has to offer. And he said freedom. And I'm like, I should go back and see that exchange to see what, if anything of substance, he had to say.
SJ, could you, or Otangelo, can either of you tell me, just paraphrase for me what Sal just said?
One of the things that he said before about choosing Christianity for choosing the goodness, unfortunately, I was busy typing up something, so I wasn't paying attention to the last couple of both of you guys, actually, Otangelo and Sal, because I was trying to type our description up, so sorry. So Sal, can you say that one more time?
Sure. I just said, okay, it boils down to, because, Danny was talking about theism versus atheism. I was saying the Christian God versus atheism. I said, for me personally, I'm not saying for anyone else. The question that I have posed also to atheists related to that would change, put me on one side versus the other. I asked T-Jump, I asked Tracy Harris, who's Matt Dillahunty's colleague on Atheist Experience. I asked Matt Dillahunty, I've asked other people. If you were that blind beggar in John chapter 9, and just think about what that would mean. You're blind, you're begging for food, you don't have a lot of prospects, a lot of uncertainty. Someone comes into your life, you've heard about the Messiah, the promised Messiah. He heals your eyes, you're able to see, he invites you, and he tells you that he's the Messiah. Would you follow him the rest of your life? If you're from that desperate a situation and someone gives you sight and you can see and offers you to follow him as the Messiah, would you do it? I was naive enough to think everyone would say yes. I was shocked that Matt Dillahunty, T-Jump, Tracy Harris all said no. And I said, okay, that tells me we're, nothing anyone could say pretty much would ever convince them. And it's like, okay, that's where they are.
I think they were dishonest all when they gave that answer, because I think if they would really be in that situation, then they wouldn't have that attitude or that disbelief.
So
yeah, I think
it's a great question. It is really a very good question. And I think with these kind of examples, you literally owed Matt Dillahunty that debate. I mean,
I still don't get it though. I still don't. I mean, I don't see. I take their things to be meaningful in life, and I agree with you, Sal. It's not because I believe that there is no God. I don't get very much meaning from that at all. It doesn't do anything for me, right? I mean, it's just to me, it's like the atheism simpliciter is just as important as quantum mechanics. I don't care about quantum mechanics, right?
But Danny, if Sal asked you that question, if you had that experience, what would you do?
Like a religious experience? I have had a couple religious experiences, and it freaked me out, right? But I just try to generally put aside my intuitions in favor of arguments, but the point you know, I might be the kind of person that in a year or two, I just find so much meaning in Christianity that I might be a Christian again. And I might retract into fideism, meaning that like philosophical argumentation is really not relevant to religious belief, right? I could take that route. I might be that kind of person, right? I'm just saying that I don't know any atheist, right? And maybe you do, Sal. I don't know any atheist that constantly preaches that atheism does something for them. Like they now have meaning because of atheism. I don't know those atheists. I've never met them. Maybe you have. I haven't.
Point. No, I'm sorry. You don't know any atheists that constantly preach it, but they behave like it. It's like, why are you guys spending so much time trying to promote that?
It's reactionary. It's just purely reactionary.
I made a meme where I wrote the fool. He defends with the enthusiasm of a believer what he doesn't believe in, and that's.
See, I never got that. It's like their meaning in life is to prove to get other people to believe that there's no meaning in life. That's their meaning, because the amount of energy that they expend, and that just kind of amuses me. It amuses me that an atheist biologist like Dan Grauer, his mission in life is to prove that his own human genome is junk. I'm just like, okay, if that floats your boat, but I fail to see the benefit of that.
No, I agree with you there. Look, one time I asked Pine Creek Doug, do you get joy from causing doubt in Christians? And he said, yes. And I said, I don't get such joy. I don't get such meaning, so to speak, right? But the point is that what the facts are is that Christianity is extremely powerful in the United States and in Western culture, right? They have incredible cultural influence that some people just are not a fan of, right? And so what they do is they react to it, right? So, you know, and I think that a lot of the militant atheists are you know, I'm talking about the anti-theists, right? Are part of that kind of response, right? They see anti-LGBT stuff and politics and their families that were Christian that disown them, and they see value and causing doubt in Christianity, this very powerful movement in Western culture, right? And to me, it's not like they get meaning from the proposition there is no God in itself, right? They get meaning from reacting to a very powerful ideology that they are not a fan of, right?
Yes.
I think a lot of them.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nathan. Go ahead.
I think a lot of them come from a quite toxic form of American evangelical culture, and American Christianity has a very specific flavor that's, you know, again, very different from British, European, and, you know, like other forms with different kind of cultural heritages. And I think a lot of the most prominent atheists that I see who, you know, use atheist symbolism, like the kind of A logo, or they incorporate it into their life in this way where it fills the hole. And I think they define themselves by the negation of everything that they used to believe as well, morally, everything that evangelical Christianity kind of stood for. I think they basically take all the meta principles that were wrong with the toxic evangelical culture they came from. They don't learn anything from it and then just do the opposite, but with the opposite set of beliefs. And so there's not like a growth or learning process that goes on for some of those people, quite a lot, who I see in the more sort of like toxic atheist community. But then there's also a lot of people, I think, who deconvert and become more loving. They develop like a more mature attitude towards disagreement. They can see how people can rationally disagree on topics better. And I would say, if a God exists, they conform more to the will of that God for how people should live than they were when they were, you know, affirming the creed every Sunday and taking communion or whatever. So,
yeah, I want to let me just say hi really quickly because Jamie Russell just came in, and so welcome, Jamie.
Hi, SJ, Nathan, Otangelo, Danny, and Sal.
Hey,
Jamie.
Well, what you highlighted, Danny, is that this is all, a lot of it is emotion based, not a lot of logic based. And so, you know, that's what I'm glad that you've observed it, that, you know, they can't justify their own behavior logically.
I think that is the immature position to take, though, Sal, especially given, you know, I think it's rather hypocritical to say that after having been questioned on the logic of your own rationale, right? That you've sort of given inadequate and conflicting statements. So I don't know, like I'm not on board with you saying that statement. Like, I think people do hold emotional positions on both sides, and the mature thing to do is like to admit that we're emotional creatures, and that plays a role in our reasoning, and to be super confident, like I'm 100% on the right side, and it's them, the other, the outer group, they're making these irrational things, while simultaneously I can't justify my own position, which is it's just not something I'm on board with.
I'm confident that something is better than nothing. That's infinitely better.
Well, I think when I'm
because having a position of zero benefit for me, they've told me, I've asked them, what do you have to offer me? If they say nothing, I'm confident I'll accept it as that. I've had enough people from the atheist side that their viewpoint offer me nothing. And just at a personal level, I'm confident I'm better off not going there. It's just that simple.
I made once a write-up in regards of Pascal Zwager, and I said, even if the Christian faith would not be true and Christ wouldn't be that historical figure which he said to be, and being God and resurrected and everything, but his moral teachings, like loving our next as ourselves, that has shaped our society to the better, and it is a positive command. And every time when I bring that up, then atheists say, oh, but that is much older than by Christianity, but that doesn't matter. The fact is that Christ's teachings and the examples which he gave, they are positively influencing our society. And if they say, oh, but Christianity has done so many bad things, but it is not upon Christ's teachings. People, they have used Christ's name, and his name they have made atrocious things, but that isn't what Christ actually taught. So I would say, even comparing that, Christianity is better, even if it wouldn't be true.
And where it really came to the, I see pictures of this. Peter Boghossian, who wrote A Manual for Creating Atheists. A Manual for Creating Atheists. In that book, he points out that he couldn't bring himself to try to make an atheist out of his mom. His mom was holding a crucifix while she was dying. And he couldn't, he said, he began to question. He said, why couldn't I? It was kind of a rhetorical question, but then something he wrestled with. Why couldn't he bring himself to try to persuade her there's no God? And it's like, that's another way of saying atheism has no answers. That said it all. Offers no meaning or comfort. Go on. I'm sorry, SJ.
My microphone's muted. I just want to say hi to Myopic Pixies Are Annoying. So I know who this is.
What's up, everybody? I've been listening to y'all for like the last hour and a half, and I just find it extraordinarily fascinating when individuals like Nathan are going to drop insults in relation to something that, per their own admission, they don't find validates their supposedly previous worldview, and then are questioning Sal's knowledge of mathematics and such, for example, in that context, because they haven't necessarily gone down every single rabbit hole, one of which in this context being one that you didn't find validity in. So I'm really understanding why you even brought that up. Are you just pissed off about the debate that never happened?
No, I think he's a pseudo-intellectual who's name-dropping things that he doesn't understand to try and build confidence in people who listen to him.
Okay, so what exactly about name drops? Okay, that doesn't change anything.
What about how I did not take name dropping from the way Sal was framing his path at all. It was recognition of other individuals of influence who had reached similar, either raised or similar questions or reached similar conclusions. Like, I'm not really sure how that's name dropping
Nathan,
versus just recognizing and like making it a point to the masses of like, hey, I'm not presenting myself to be some special thinker. These guys who are recognized as such thought the same thing. and I'd looked at this as being on the right path. Like, do you not recognize that?
Well, Nathan, let me tell you something. I know that Sal doesn't need it, but I know Sal for 6-7 months or something, even more or so, and he is someone that has a knowledge which I rarely see with other Christians, and he has a very fantastic curriculum, actually, and he defends his faith in a way which I see rarely other Christians doing. And I mean, I don't know where you are getting this from, that he's a pseudo-intellectualist. I mean, hey.
Yeah, Sal's very knowledgeable, and he does have a lot of degrees. He's just being modest.
Say I told you a story about why I'm so confident that atheism is true, and I said, look, I read Augustine, it just did nothing for me, right? I read Aquinas, it did nothing for me. I read Pseudo-Dionysius, the Areopagite, it did nothing for me. The Cappadocian Fathers, they've got nothing to say, okay? St. Paul, it's just all contradictory nonsense. And then you say, oh, what was Paul's theology? And I say, I've got no idea. What was the late Augustine's major theological work? I don't know, I've just not got a clue. And what was Luther's main contribution to theology?
Nathan, how old are you?
24.
Okay. Why don't you shut your mouth until you're 60, and then we'll come back and we'll interrogate you.
No, shut your mouth.
Do you remember every single thing you've ever read?
Shut your mouth. That's the level of the debate.
Instead of being a child. How about that?
No, you shut your mouth and stop being a child. No, you. My dad's bigger than yours. My dad beat your dad in a fight. My dad beat your dad up.
Oh,
show me some respect. My dad had beat your dad up.
Nathan, let me answer to that.
I know you did jiu-jitsu, whatever, and you
John, be quiet a minute, please. Let me answer to that.
But dude, seriously, just have some basic respect for people, and don't come out being a jackass, especially when folks are trying to give you a second opportunity.
Being a jackass yourself. My dad is going to beat your dad up.
Dude, a couple months ago, you were literally trying to, you and your little buddy James Fodor,
dude,
we're actively attempting to create a conflict between myself and Salvador.
My dad can beat your dad up.
That's not what we're talking about, dude.
It's not worth it. You're younger than me. You're immature. I'm so bigger than yours. You didn't grasp so big. Dude, what do you even bench, bro? Like, I bench like 3 times more than you.
Okay. Anyway, so going back to the level of maturity, until you haven't had the same level of life experience, and I can tell you that I would let
SJ. Son, let me tell you, after I've paid off a financed car, son, what life's really like.
Wow. Okay. So here's why I was questioning Nathan earlier, SJ. But I'm going to ask you a question, SJ. As a PhD and somebody who's high level education, do you remember the details of every single scientific paper you have, or every paper you've read over the years?
No, I don't. I have to say, to earn a PhD, you have to take a comprehensive exam, and you're supposed to pretty much memorize every journal that you've ever written. So I've got a very good memory of a lot of the journals, but there's a ton of them I've forgotten by now. Sure.
Now, do you remember the main positions in your field? Do you know them, SJ? In the field that you claim expertise in? Yeah. Okay.
In the ones I teach, sure.
What's Gödel's incompleteness theorem again?
Okay, so does Sal claim to be a philosophy PhD?
It's a mathematics.
Does he claim to be an expert? You just said if somebody has a PhD, does Sal claim to be a professional philosopher? Yes or no?
I'm talking about mathematics, not philosophy.
Expert in philosophy? Yes or no?
I'm talking about mathematics. Am I claiming that Sal's a professional philosopher? Expertise in mathematics?
You asked him multiple questions about a variety of things, some of which were philosophies, not just mathematics.
What about right now? What am I saying right now?
Mathematics, yes or no?
Do you want to just shout at a brick wall or something? Like,
do you want to answer basic questions?
Well, what's it got to do with what I've got to say? I'm asking him. He's talking about maths, right?
You can still respond to my questions, or you're just going to dodge.
Well, it's got nothing to do with my point.
You're the one that decided.
Where does it go? Okay, do you like McFlurries? Yes or no?
Not really.
Stop dodging. Answer my question. That's not the answer I wanted.
Do I like McFlurries? No.
The real answer is you don't like McFlurries. What kind of person are you? You don't like McFlurries.
What does that have to do with my position being established?
Exactly. It has nothing to do with your position.
So I'm asking you about your position in regarding Sal. Does Sal create himself and postulate himself to be an expert in philosophy? Yes or no?
I think he puts himself forward as someone who's educated in this domain. Yeah.
No, he put himself forward as somebody who had questions about his worldview, and went to go and look at the things that were put forth as supposed answers, and didn't find them. People do this all the time. The vast majority of humans do not go and become hyper-focused people like you. You do realize this, correct?
What's your point here?
Do you think that 99% of humanity goes and reads every freaking book and can name every single argument and fallacy and so on and so forth in relation to philosophy?
He doesn't have to know every one. If he's going to claim to be educated in a STEM field, he should know the basics of a STEM subject, right? Or do you disagree? Maybe you think we should just hand out degrees at like a degree mill.
No, that's not the point being made. The point being made is that I made earlier was if something hasn't necessarily been your focus for 20, 30 years, then you necessarily remembering every single aspect of it is not a very rational, especially if you've been focused in an entirely different field.
Well, that's why I asked you. He name dropped Gödel's incompleteness theorems as justifying the things he was talking about.
Started forgetting things yet. You do realize
he dropped Gödel's incompleteness theorems as justifying the things he's talking about.
Do you accept the premise that as you get older, there were things that you will not remember in immediate detail, instantaneous recall? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Then your entire point is you being a myopic little immature brat who's pissed off and trying to pull a one-upmanship game, which you do on a regular basis, and which is why I was questioning your supposed transition, because the second Sal came in here, you came out of nowhere and started being your old snake in the grass attitude. It was obvious.
I disagree, and you're a child and my voice is bigger than you. And if Sal wants to pretend to be a STEM expert,
you normally are. This is why I
pretend to be a STEM expert, then he should know the basics of the STEM subject.
Well, maybe we should take a break on that.
If I could point out something, SJ, I was showing all the math books from my classes. I have 50, 60 credit hours in math from undergrad and graduate. I was just looking through the index, and I didn't see Gödel mentioned in any of the books. Here's the pile right here.
What's the Minkowski short?
Here's the pile right here.
Okay, let's do linear algebra then, okay, right?
You're insinuating I didn't study mathematics.
Well, I
just showed a pile here. It doesn't mention Gödel. So you're going to go down some obscure
what's an identity matrix?
I'm incompetent.
It's all he is.
Sal, what's an identity matrix?
Appreciate you, SJ. Sorry for the controversy.
This is basic linear algebra then, because you talk about linear algebra. Linear algebra. What's an identity matrix?
Well, let's not. You guys here. Let me. It's actually been exactly 3 hours now since I went on here, so I wanted to see if you guys would like to maybe just go around, because I need to close it up. I need to go cook some chicken, so I've got chicken marinating right now. So I wanted to see if I could go around and just find out what everybody's working on and all that kind of good stuff. So if that's okay. And I could start. I've got Nathan right on top here, right next to me. So maybe just kind of go around Nathan, Otangelo, Jamie, Danny, and then Sal. Just kind of go right in that order.
Yeah. I mean, it got a bit heated there, and I mean, I've not been particularly nice, but I get incredibly frustrated when people misrepresent what the science is, what theology, what philosophy have to say, and overconfidently and dogmatically hold to positions that they themselves can't justify and don't know the basics about. And I think it's incredibly dishonest, and I really want to push back against that and encourage people to sort of be honest with their thinking, be honest with their justification and stuff. I think people can be Christians and rationally believe in it and so forth. I think it can be a brilliant and beautiful thing, but it becomes toxic when people become overconfident, especially in things that they can't justify, and then they stop holding themselves to standards of justification in forming all sorts of beliefs about the world. And then that's when you get people enacting toxic behaviors because they don't feel the need to justify their moral attitudes towards people. So those are my thoughts.
Well, I've seen different sides of you, Nathan. I've seen a very friendly side of you. That's the one I usually see. And I see every once in a while, I do see you like in this particular case, I can say I like it better when there aren't these kind of interactions where I see that. But I guess you felt pretty strongly about that. And so Sal will have a response, I'm sure. And so that's, and I do appreciate you coming on. I like that you, Danny, you guys are atheists in the hot seat right now. Actually, you're not an atheist anymore. I think both of you now are agnostics and maybe moving towards Christianity in some way. But so I appreciate that.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm sorry if you don't want that on your channel. I just don't want to be. I don't want to be quiet when someone's being incredibly toxic. You know, he called me, you know, like small and son and stuff like that. So my reason for saying like my biceps are bigger than yours and my dad will beat you up is because I want to show that's the level that this guy's engaging at. And I'm just going to like, I don't think that that's a good argument. I think it's childish, but I want to show that that's like the level of like intellectual artillery that this guy's bringing to the game. And I'm going to just do the same back. I mean, if people want to see that, that's that.
Yeah, that was probably not, we're not showcasing our finest Christian values in some of these interactions. I can say that. So let me go to Otangelo.
Yes, I mentioned Gödel's theorem as well, and I really don't understand the math whatsoever. I'm very bad in mathematics, but I did read Perry Marshall about Gödel's theorem about 15 years ago or so. It was about explaining information in biology and so forth. And the point which he made, I pointed it out, and it made sense to me, and it helped me to understand some concepts in philosophy in regards of origins, that we cannot prove things which are outside the physical realm, outside of the universe. But in order to understand that and to make a point, I didn't need to understand actually the math. So if Sal, I think Sal was in perfect right to mention Gödel, understanding the math behind or not, that is irrelevant. The point which sometimes is made is more about the moral of something, not necessarily you understanding the math. And I mean, this is not a competition about what we know or what we don't know. So I see that really in defense of Sal. And I think your criticism, Nathan, I don't think it was justified. Okay, SJ, it was fun to be again at your channel. So I hope there will be other opportunities where we can have exchanges about Christianity and all kinds of topics.
Yeah, I'm going to try to do more open mics. I haven't done this in a while, and I think I'll go back to starting to do this again because I think these are good. These are good, and I think people learn a lot from each other. So I've learned something from all of you. And actually, I just saw a logical, plausible, probable just said that Tom Rabbit has already made a video with Darth Dawkins exposed, which I can't believe. I was going to go, when I got to the end of this, I was going to go delete that little piece. So anyway.
They exposed as what, though? I'm just curious.
His camera came on when he was in here.
Oh, okay.
So I was going to delete that little piece out of here. You know how you can do that? You can edit your video. I haven't even had a chance to do that. He's already
no.
So, okay. So let's go to Jamie. Jamie, it's good to see you again. I haven't seen you in a while, but I saw you. Yeah. I've seen you in people's chats.
Yeah. Yeah. Separating it from the accusation on Sal, I do resonate with what Nathan was saying in the sense that we shouldn't talk beyond our means. But if you're familiar with Sal, I think what he was saying was perfectly in line with his honest journey that he's given in his in some of his other videos, and he was just describing his own personal journey in that sense. And so I don't know, I get the point, but I think, yeah, that's how I feel about that. I was actually really curious because I actually tend to agree with what Angelo had said before that. I was curious what Danny and Nathan would say about the historical facts of Christianity's influence on Western culture and how much they give credence to that idea. But anyways, thanks for having me. And if anybody wants to join, there's gonna be a live stream in another channel. I'll put the link in the private chat.
I don't see the link, but okay.
Good, thank you.
There it is.
We'll look for that link. Do I have you as? Did I give you a wrench? I should have, probably, right? I'll have to go back and look. I think I've got two screens going to see if I've given people wrenches. I mean to give a lot of you wrenches. Okay, Danny, did you want to say anything?
Well, just very briefly to what Jamie said about the historicity. Suppose I grant all the historical facts. That might cause me to be a Christian. But I think there's an interesting. Sorry, one second. Can y'all hear that?
I meant more the influence on Western culture, like how it's developed from Christian ethics.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely been an influence.
Yeah, just to quickly comment on that, even though SJ is closing, I think there's been a massive positive influence of Christianity on Western culture. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think Tom Holland in his book Dominion's done a really good job outlining that. So
yeah,
where are we now?
We could have a whole discussion on that, obviously, but
maybe that'll be the next open mic that we have. We'll talk about Christianity and the influence on history. I think that'd be interesting. And I'd like to see everybody's perspectives. Yeah, no problem, Lisa. I figured something happened. You left your keys in your car. Oh, no. So Lisa was going to come on, but we're going to have her on again, hopefully soon. She sees that this is still going after 3 hours. So Lisa, I just opened it up. Thank you so much. I love having you on here. So Sal.
Sorry, I kept muting my mic. Thank you for having me on. My final comments are that there was some discussion about me. This topic isn't about me. It's about whether Jesus is real. One can assume for the sake of argument, I'm stupid, ignorant, uneducated, irrational, and a scoundrel. That doesn't change the fundamental question whether Jesus Christ is real. Or that question I posed from John chapter 9. If Jesus came along and healed you, would you follow him the rest of your life? Though I've not had miracles of that level in my life, there's enough to make me think. So contrast what happened to me recently with my mother passing and that of Peter Boghossian. Peter Boghossian's mother was passing. His mother was holding a cross in her hand, a crucifix, presumably a rosary or something. And Boghossian prided himself on creating a manual for atheists and making other people atheists. When push came to shove, he could see no benefit to trying to make his own mother an atheist. And that just symbolizes that there are no answers in atheism. That, whatever the philosophical arguments are, to me, there's no answers in atheism. So we don't have as many facts as we would like to have. So many of our decisions in life are made with less facts than we'd like to have. We've mentioned Gödel's incompleteness theorem. There are decisions we make even in mathematics to adopt axioms that we have no absolute proof or a system of math that is consistent. We will just accept it as a matter of faith and proceed, and that there are also questions. And so that basically is where it is for me. If one group of people in general have told me they have no proof of their position, meaning atheism, that they can't prove that it offers me anything, then it's like, okay, I'm just going to move on because I think Jesus answers prayers. I think, and it is a testable hypothesis also. When we die, we'll see. The testable hypothesis is you'll be before the judgment throne of God or not. I'm not willing to take that risk. And I'm also excited at the possibility that the Christian God is real. And so for that reason, I pursued Christianity. And the more that I have pursued it, the more believable it has become. And it's become more unbelievable. To paraphrase Frank Turek, it's actually harder. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. This universe doesn't look like an accident. Darwinian evolution fails as a theory scientifically, so does abiogenesis. There's fine-tuning in the universe, as Hugh Ross said. All these things point to a creator. And maybe the Lord, I've often said, one reason God is either partially or mostly hidden is he's winnowing out the people that really want him versus those that don't. So the people that said, if Jesus healed them of blindness, would they follow? And they said, no. It's like, okay, God's kind of winnowed those people out. So that's kind of my answer to the problem of the hiddenness of God. And as far as the problem of evil, 1 Corinthians 4:17, for this momentary light affliction is building for us an eternal weight of glory, and that is the Christian hope. And so that is what I try to represent. It doesn't matter whether I'm educated or not. That's not the issue. The issue is whether Jesus rose from the dead, if he's real, and is he who he claims to be. And so thank you, SJ.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, all of you. I enjoyed this today, and this was spur of the moment. And so I really appreciate that people decided to get on here. And I appreciate that Lisa, I'm sure I'll be able to reschedule with her. She lost her keys, I guess, had a little issue, but that should work out. And so it's nice seeing all of you. I'd love to see Danny and Nathan 100% in the Christian camp. I know that both of you have said positive things about Christianity, and I think that's good. Nathan speaking earlier for his affiliation with the Eastern Orthodox Church and going to church and enjoying it and enjoying Bible study. And Danny mentioning that he believes that Christianity has had a positive impact on our history. And so I think these are pluses that are good. And you guys are both very young. I think John Maddox emphasize the fact that you are young. I wish I were your age still. Sal and I are more in the older crowd. I don't know where Otangelo stands, but I think he's older too.
He's in the older crowd.
So we're like the older. And in fact, it's kind of hilarious. You know what was happening? I'll just mention really quickly. I was teaching a class yesterday, and I've got these very young students. They're in their early 20s, and in this HR class that I was teaching. And I have two of the students who are coming in from afar. They're zoomed in. So I have them on Zoom. And so I had the camera facing the other students for a couple of minutes. And I hear the one student ask the other ones, where's the nice old lady? Did she leave?
So SJ, how old do you think am I?
That's a good question, Otangelo. It's hard to tell. I can see that. I think you've got gray hair, so I'm going to guess that you're a little bit older, maybe like 40 something, 40.
Thank you. I'm 54, so.
Oh, okay. Well, you look young. And and these two, I think Danny and Nathan are very fortunate because you've got a lot of life still left to live, and the three of us don't have quite as much possible. I mean, depends on what average life expectancies are. So,
I feel so old at 24, like as in that. I think like my joints are going and my body's getting older and gaining weight and stuff.
Yeah, same here. Is there really a point after 35? Like, is that what y'all are telling me?
Yeah, after 35, at least your car insurance gets lower.
Happy after 35, I've seen people after 35, and I don't want to be like them.
Well, Nathan, with 24, you feel old. I think that must be because you are consuming too many neurons with your agnosticism. But as soon as you convert and become a Christian, then you will gain a completely new vigor and a new start in your life,
We'll see, I guess. I think it's probably because I've not been going to the gym for a year, but
oh, you got to get back to I just started going to the gym regularly now, so after all these years. The old lady's going to the gym. So it's like, that was so funny with that student. I just started cracking up. All right, you guys, I just want to say thank you so much. I'm going to try to do these more normal, and I hope all of you will come back. So just remember, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. And so thank you, everybody.